All right, guys. I hope that little hyped up intro song got your blood going like it does mine. I'm going to go ahead and drink to that. Meanwhile, I'm testing out my new audio. Let me know how this new audio sounds. Voodoo Child, right on, right on. Sounds great from Washington State. Thank you, Phil Rowe. Thank you, Victoria. Hey, Victoria. I guess this one's not too late for you, huh? Awesome. Audio sounds great. Rhino from Texas. Thank you, man. Hope you feel better. Your new studio looks awesome. I got pictures of Rhino's new studio today. He's been putting it together. It's pretty impressive. I'm a little jealous. Let's see here. All right. Yeah, we're going to get into it today. I set aside Saturday and Sunday, and I've told a lot of people that I wasn't going to do anything. I'm not going out. No out to eat. Don't invite me anywhere. Please let me make it. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I got things to do. A lot of admin stuff to do. And Dawn and I were taking care of orders. We had to overnight some packages from my publisher to cover more books because a lot more books sold than I was anticipating. And yeah, thank you, Jahara. Thank you, Lexi. Seema Dragon. I'm glad I went and got this new camera. I've gone through about 5 or 6 cameras, guys. I don't have a lot of luck with cameras. Even the real nice, expensive ones, guys, it's just not worth it all. I got a whole bunch of studio equipment here. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Doesn't work. It seems like a $200 Logitech camera and microphone that I'm using right now. It's all magnetic. It's real nice. It's about $210. But it's way better than the 3 cameras that I've already tried to use. And this one has nothing but a C-class cord. It just taps right into my laptop. I don't have to use any of this auxiliary material. And you guys say I sound just fine. So I'm just going to stick with this. It's crazy. So much for buying all this other stuff. Man. So I'm gonna help Dawn with nothing but sales. She's like a beast with that stuff. You know, many years working for the money man in oil and gas, the CFO. She's got a lot of skill sets, and it just blows my mind how fast she can put these Excel spreadsheets together and all these charts and have all this information, all these sales, who's paid, who's waiting to pay, all their addresses, postage. She's got a little she's got a U.S. Postal Service digital scale in her office where she can literally mail things from her office, package it up, and just go take it straight to the post office and mail it. She's far more sophisticated than I am. But anyway, I went to sleep last night thinking that I'm going to just answer emails all day. But that's not what I woke up with on my mind. I go to sleep thinking that, okay, I've got these 3 presentations set aside for Archaix TV, and I'm about to get them out. But they're awesome, back to back, just fiery stuff. And I'm thinking, well, I got to get that out this weekend, and I'm going to. And then I'm thinking about all these other things I have to do, and just inspiration hits you sometimes. The video presentation I'm giving you right now was not a part of the Ogygian deluge series. It was never going to be a part of it. All I was going to do was what I did. The very first one was Easter Island, showing you in 1687 BC, the Phoenix phenomenon wiped out Easter Island and a bunch of Pacific islands. Then I showed you part 2 of the Ogygian deluge series, the most unknown and widely ignored cataclysm in world history. You don't read about it in any modern history books, but it's everywhere in all the books of the ancient world. The Ogygian flood, the flood of Ogyges, 1687 BC, the year 2208 Annus Mundi, or the 2208 Old World Calendar. So I put these 2 videos out, and then Martin and I did another one, the satellites of Tiahuanaco. This is everything else in the South America, Central America, North America, from Hawaii all the way down to Pacifica, the island of Yap, the Carolines, the ancient basalt city of Metallinen, included it all. They're all destroyed in 1687 BC. I've only covered one hemisphere. My fourth Ogygian flood video was going to be about all the ancient texts and that we're talking about what happened that actually say Ogygian deluge, that actually say the flood of Ogyges, that talk about the cataclysm, that talk about what appeared in the sky, how every civilization collapsed at the same time, what had happened, what initiated this 25-year darkness. All this was my plan. But when inspiration hits, plans go out the water. You still have that video coming. I still have all that data. Most of it I've never even revealed before. It's amazing all the Mediterranean records we have about the Ogygian deluge and that nobody's talking about it. It's a phoenix year. But inspiration led me another way. And that's why you got this video. I put this video together in like 2 hours. I woke up this morning with just overwhelming amount of inspiration just flooding through me, went straight to my computer, started looking at stuff, and I knew that I had to do another Ogygian deluge from a totally different perspective. I had to do it from their perspective, not ours ex post facto, looking from the future back into the past at what happened. No, inspiration hit me, and I knew exactly how I could do this, starting in the pre-flood world, starting from the perspective of the civilizations that were developing and growing, and the calendars that they were employing, of what they knew about the world they lived in, and how and why the Ogygian deluge completely caught the old world by surprise. It shouldn't have been that way. Why did it happen? How did every ancient megalithic building, technolithic constructing engineered societies all get caught by surprise in the month of May, 1687 BC, when they are all descended from civilizations that knew that they were suffering systemic resets? They knew about the vapor canopy collapses that caused the great floods of the capture of Luna when the moon appeared. They knew the vapor canopy collapse of 3439 BC when Enki appeared in the Anunnaki. They started a calendar for that. They knew 3895 BC Adam and Eve reset. They knew of that collapse. Every time a vapor canopy collapses, there's major flooding. We're going to get into that here. They knew about the great flood of Noah, 2239 BC in the month of May. They knew the vapor canopy is this day the sky fell. They knew all this. So having known all of this history, and they were meticulous historians. Remember, these are the civilizations that gave us the Yugas, that gave us the Mayan long count, that gave us the ancient Olmec calendars, that gave us the day count systems, that gave us the Venus almanacs. These are the systems that used to count the turnings of the stars around Alpha Draconis. They were meticulous in their record keeping. How did they all get caught by surprise? And they did. Remember, in the first 3 Ogygian deluge presentations, I've already told you guys and showed you where archaeologists have been baffled that all these sites were these megalithic super constructions, gigantic boulders, walls, canal works, dikes, everything built on a high elevated ground as if they were building for a flood. All this stuff was left in place. The stone heads and busts on Easter Island were found in a line from the top of the quarries on the volcano, in a line down the road, going down the mountain in a row, all the way to the beach, all the way to the shore. And it always baffled his stories. Why? It's like they were marching in line. But no, all work stopped as they were transporting them. And the ones that were still in the quarry, you can see where they're still laying in the quarry in situ. They were never finished. Just like Baalbek has the largest stone block in the world. In situ, it hasn't been detached because it wasn't finished. Instead, what did archaeologists find? They found chisels and hammers in workshops abandoned. Archaeologists dug the dirt and all the mud away and found at the ground level where the workshops were, and it's all abandoned. It's as if people ran away instantly. They were scared. And it wasn't just in the Middle East. I showed you in those 3 videos. That's what happened all throughout the Americas, from North America to South America to Easter Island. They left the quarries and the workshops rapidly. What caught them by surprise so bad? Well, you already know. Anybody watching Archaix knows the Phoenix phenomenon caught them by surprise. But why were they caught by surprise when they have this long history of meticulously recording all these events, even to the point that each event started another calendar? And each calendar was actually a countdown. How? That's what we're going to answer in this video. Inspiration struck me this morning, and it all became so clear how every civilization speaking totally different languages, working under different mathematical systems, under different calendars, but yet having the same histories, how they could all fall prey to something and all fall victim. They weren't prepared for what happened because they didn't know that year that event was going to occur, because they were convinced they had 48 more years. And that's why they were constructing. That's why all these megalithic metropolises were all being built at the same time on high ground, away from floodplains, with megalithic earthquake-proof cyclopean masonry and building techniques that ensured that their constructions could absorb shock. Guys, inspiration struck me to go ahead and present an entire video from the perspective of the ancients, the ancient engineers, the ancient stargazers, the ancient timekeepers, us back then. This video is from their perspective of century by century up until this event. And by the time I get to this event, you're going to understand exactly how every civilization in the world got caught flat-footed, thinking they had 48 years when they didn't. So that's what we're going to get into. That's my intro. I'm going to wait for a few more people to stack up in here. Sorry to be overly dramatic, but I'm telling you now, when inspiration strikes me, everybody who's close, all my friends and family, they're close to, they know everything in the world gets tossed out the window. I ride the waves of inspiration because it's never failed me. It's never failed me. I may go 4, 5, 6, 7 days doing my own thing, but then when that inspiration hits me, I got to listen to it. I got to respond to it. I got to ride that rhythm. And that's what I'm doing today. And this presentation is going to be fantastic. All right, check out this chat. Thank you guys for those donations. Always appreciated. My 2 full-time employees, they really appreciate it. Let's see. Dawn, I need coffee. Hey, Face Diaper, I got the big one today. Only 810 people in the chat. We must, Saturday, everybody's busy. It's beautiful outside. I get it. I get it. I get it. I had a real good live video the other day. We almost hit 2,000 people in the chat, or 2,000 people watching all at the same time. That was amazing. That was the day before yesterday. Yeah, I was getting some notes prepared last night, just doing different stuff, and I came across a Billy Carson video, and he was explaining to people how to use their spirit to increase their bank account. Literally, that was the message. I listened to it. I could quote him. Yeah, man. You got to take these ideas, man, these 2-dimensional ideas, and you got to run them through your spirit, man, and build a 3-dimensional picture, man. So in 4D time, that money will appear in your bank account. Yeah, man. It's exactly what I heard. What really impressed me though was he's got 697,000 subs, but he can't get 500 people in the chat. It's crazy. I heard rumors that some people are just buying subs. I ain't never had the money to do that. I just grow organically. Welcome, Prophet 615. You in for a ride. Yeah, Charlie. So the money can appear in his bank account. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yeah. I saw somebody asking about Michael Desarion again. Hey guys, yeah, I did a really good chat, 2-hour chat with Michael Desarion. It was in his venue, Unslaved. It was good chat. Now I have my own version from a secondary camera of me talking and him on the screen, but that's only on Archaix TV. I'm not putting that on YouTube. That's he invited me to his venue, and he's been so censored and restricted that he's basically narrowed his community down to unslaved. He doesn't do anything on YouTube, doesn't do anything. So I'm going to honor that. So I can't just put that on YouTube, not without his permission. But those of you who are subscribed to Archaix TV, I mean, it's on there for you to listen to. A lot of people have, they like it. Let's see. Oh, he hasn't even put it up on his yet, huh? I didn't know that. Didn't even know. Yeah, for those of you just joining us, I already started straight out the gate laying out exactly what we're going to present today. We're going to do this from the perspective of who we were 4,800 years ago, and we're going to move forward in time closer to where we are today until we get to the Ogygian deluge, so you guys can understand exactly how the entire world was deceived. The entire world was deceived. Yeah. The same thing you get with the Jewish calendar today. All these people thinking the Jewish calendar is old. All these people thinking the Jewish calendar has substance. It means something that people just don't even realize the Jewish calendar is not even in the Bible. But yeah, it's crazy. Jewish calendar means nothing. Absolute fiction, just totally made up. It lines up with nothing in history at all. It's a total fiction. Somebody said, "What's Tazarian's view on simulation theory?" I don't know, but if you're new to my channel and you're assuming that simulation theory is basically all I put out, then you got a lot to learn here. A lot to learn here. Simulation theory is a personal conclusion based off all the data sets that I cannot reconcile otherwise. It is not something I impose upon you. You don't have to believe it. The Archaix data stands alone. It does not need simulation theory. Yeah, let's not confuse the two. Oh, 921 in the chat. We're almost there. Man, I'm so glad my audio is good. 138 check. Thank you, sir. Love that number. Love that number. Yeah, I got up this morning. Dawn asked me what was going on. I said, "Girl, I'm on fire. I don't know what happened. I woke up with something. I woke up with my spirit vibrating, and I'm thinking about something. I gotta go look at some notes." So, man, 2 hours later, I came out of those notes with a full presentation. As you guys know, when I do these Ogygian presentations, the data is so much to take in. I don't expect you to take it in a single video presentation, even if you listen to the video 2 or 3 times. So I provide free PDF downloads. I'm going to put a link in the description box of this video as soon as this video is over, where you can download this entire presentation. It's deep. It's going to make sense of the entire ancient world and why they developed all their calendars and why the ancient world that we've been taught is after the 25-year darkness of the Ogygian deluge in 1687 BC. Because the ancient world that was before 1687 BC that we're going to be talking about was technologically advanced, and it was nothing like after 1687 BC. A whole lot of focus has been put on the great flood of Noah, which was 552 years, a phoenix cycle before the Ogygian deluge. It was in the month of May in the year 2239 BC. However, we are seeing more and more and more evidence that flood, that collapse of the vapor canopy wasn't near as destructive as the 1687 BC. The first 3 videos I've already shown you, it was total destruction. It was absolute civilization wipeout. We don't really have that with the 2239 BC. We do have scientific verification from many different sources that in about 2240 BC, which is 1 year variance, about 2240 BC, every old Bronze Age civilization collapsed. But that's not a wipeout. We still had many cultures and races that further developed to become mighty nations and empires in the Heliolithic Maritime Empire of the post-Technolithic period, which was after the Great Flood of 2239 BC. So for so many hundreds of millions of people to still be here, what we had with the Great Flood of Noah was a great scattering and a great destruction, maybe earthquakes, infrastructure collapsed, people moved around to survive. But 552 years later, they're building metropolises of megalithic blocks all over the world. And the program got interrupted. And archaeologists have never had a sufficient explanation for why all these tools, hammers, chisels are found in the workshops and quarries as if they were just thrown down. But there's no skeletons. The people all made it away. You have to understand, guys, it's not common in antiquity to abandon a tool. In some cultures in ancient times, when a worker was given a tool, his life depended upon its return. Yeah, you couldn't just borrow a tool. It's like Texas prison today. You turn your ID card in to get a screwdriver to go use that screwdriver where you need it. You better bring that screwdriver back to get your ID back because you can't do anything. You can't eat. You can't sleep. You can't walk around from building to building and cell block to cell block without your ID. In Texas prison, same thing in the ancient world. You had better keep up with your tools. To drop tools, hammers, and chisels would have been some type of corporal punishment to lose those tools in the ancient world. Yeah, it wasn't like today when you can manufacture things so easily and we're often just losing the very tools we just bought a week before. It wasn't like that back then. So to find tools and weaponry and all the stuff abandoned on the ground, right there where archaeologists say was the ancient surface of those workshops. No, something caused people to drop everything and run. So this is what we're getting into, guys. The Ogygian deluge, but we're not looking from our perspective back into the past. We're going to go into the past where it all began. And then we're going to move forward to the Ogygian deluge. And your eyes are going to be open as to the critical mistake that they made. I love that coffee. Over 1,000 in the chat. It's time to begin. It's time to begin. So another thing we're going to answer how it was possible in this presentation. We're going to answer how exactly it was possible for a cataclysm to even sneak up on them when they had already documented so widely and created all these calendars as evidence of that documentation of all these past resets, these past floods, these past cataclysms, these past vapor canopy collapses. How? I'm going to tell you how. We're also going to answer in this presentation really, how would I word that? Yeah, we'll just get into the presentation because that's just being redundant now. It's going through my mind. So we will answer in this presentation, though, how did they not predict the return of the Phoenix in 1687 BC? How did you not do that when the Great Flood 552 years before was also caused by the Phoenix? Okay, But so was an event before that. During the vapor canopy period, we have a Phoenix phenomenon event, 2647 BC or 2653 BC. One's Nemesis X, one's Phoenix. But we have the events recorded. They're in my chronicon. Excuse me, they're in my chronicon. So with two, maybe three, 3895 BC, Adam and Eve reset. With two, maybe three Phoenix episodes already recorded in the past, how did they not know that this was going to happen? You're going to find out in this presentation. It has everything to do with how we compute time. And this is relevant to where we are today. So a lot of people that are borrowing into the socialist, communist mindset of undermining of society. Years ago, a series of papers were published. They're widely distributed. The Communist Manifesto was specific about how they were going to basically create the fall of the West. They knew that militarily they could never do it. So they knew that the day has come. This is published over 100 years ago. But they knew that they had to get the American people, mainly the people of the United States, is what they were focused on. They needed to get the American people to no longer trust their presidents, no longer trust their governments, no longer trust their militaries, no longer trust their collegiate and scholastic institutions, no longer trust their scientific institutions. They needed the American people to no longer exercise trust in their schools, in their social networks, to no longer trust each other. They needed, and in order to do that, they had set out to publish a tremendous amount of materials to get the American people to not even trust their histories, to question everything, and make sure that the American people would get to the point where they actually hit a tipping point where now they trusted absolutely nothing is real. And once they got to that point, then the communist, socialist, globalists could then do what they want with the American people. This is long known by a lot of people. I'm not the only one talking about this. Is more Archaix TV related material, but truth be told, there are hundreds of books and authors that talk about this. One of the things is that all history is fake, or there's a missing 1,000 years, and all these are socialist, communist engineered arguments trying to get people to completely lose faith in all study, research, and erudition. This is why Archaix is important, guys. We have to stick with the chrono markers because we have thousands of them. We have old books absolutely packed with chronological material that allows us to put the whole history of the world back together again. But it's our colleges and our professors and our researchers and our teachers and our intelligence agencies that are undermining this and trying to convince the world that none of this material exists, none of it can be trusted, therefore it should be destroyed. So, anyway, yeah, it's crazy, guys. It really is. It really is. So this story begins in 3499 BC. In the year 3499 BC, cultures were still in a totem primitivism. There wasn't any urban planning yet. We have no evidence whatsoever of anything beyond Ubaid culture. Ubaid culture is pre-Sumerian culture. But what we find is very interesting. And there were a lot of humans here, but there are already definitive races. There's already different groups. There's already different language groups all around. So in 3499 BC, we have a people who are already familiar with a history, and it was a history of 600-year periods, these great epics. And they believed that the creation was on the 600-year deal, but the creation was born out of an ancient destruction. They called it the Nemesis cataclysm, or the Nemesis beginning, origin of Nemesis, or Mother Nemesis. And she was the creatrix, the beginning, but it was her anger and wrath that actually created a livable universe. So It was 600 years later that her children rebelled. 4639 BC. The Nemesis Cataclysm was 5239 BC. The two dates are 600 years apart. And 600 years after that was the first time Luna appeared. It was the day the moon appeared. It's called the capture flood. Now, remember, I've explained in prior presentations that there are cultures in this world that do remember a time before the moon appeared. And civilizations that existed before the moon was here were called pre-Selenites. They prided themselves that they had existed before the moon appeared in the sky. This was the capture flood was 4039 BC. It was on the 600-year timeline. And 600 years after that is the year 3439 BC, the appearance of Enki and Sumero-Sino to join Anuna that had appeared 60 years earlier in 3499 BC. So we're going to be getting into some Zecharia Sitchin in this presentation because I'm going to give you the exact numbers from the Sumerian tablets in cuneiform text that Zecharia Sitchin gives you, but his translations are completely wrong. You already know he talks about hundreds of thousands of years and tens of thousands of years. I'm going to give it to you exactly the way it was supposed to be translated because it all fits perfectly. So this is where we begin our story. 60 years before the arrival of Enki and a whole group of Anuna was the appearance of the Nemesis X object. 60 years later was 3439 BC, and it's the Gihon flood. 1/3 of the entire world's population dies, according to the book of Jasher. This is in the days of Enoch, who we know this is Enoch. We know him as Enki. So two different cultures recording basically the same person. So what we have here is a belief, a pre-existing belief. As this narrative for this video begins, we start with a belief in a 600-year period. This is the Anunnaki Ner chronology. I have given many presentations on this timeline and showed you through world history everything that happened every 600 years. You can go to my Anuna Files playlist to see those presentations. But for this presentation, we find that the Anunnaki Ner was also subdivided by the Deccan, meaning 10 periods of 60 years each is what formed a 600-year Ner. So we have 3439 BC, the appearance of Enki with a calendrical system that's already operative, the 600-year system. But now it seems that with the appearance of so important an ancient figure and figures, the Anuna, that now the 60-year period enters the historical record as something interesting. And this is what we find in the traditional records, as I'm going to read. So we move on from 3499, which is 60 years before their appearance, to the year 3468. Now, this is only an approximate by Chinese scholars. Remember the title of this presentation, Sumero-Sino. You're going to hear a lot of evidence in this presentation that the Sumerians and the ancient Chinese, going back far enough, were the same people. So it's very interesting, guys. Revenge of the Ners. Nelson, you need to stop. So the Chinese traditional date for the birth of Fuhi. Fuhi was a prophet, a mathematician, an architect. Fuhi was one of the greatest of all heroes in ancient China. He was before the historical period. And Chinese scholars think it was right around this date of 3468 BC, which was right here in the 60 years. It's inside the 60 years of the first appearance of the Anuna with the Nemesis X object in 3499 BC, and 60 years later with the appearance of Enki after Anuna were already here. So in the 60-year window, Fuhi appears, this prophet. and he predicts the coming of a savior of this world, but the savior's coming in a distant period. So Fuhi is a Chinese Enoch, basically a Chinese Enoch, and we'll get more into Fuhi here in a minute. But the Chinese approximate is only 29 years difference from the appearance of Enki and Enoch in 3439 BC. For those who are new to my channel, there are many presentations where I go over the actual specifics and source materials on the chrono markers to be able to show you these things. These are not arbitrary. They're not made up by me. Almost every date that I get from anything is dated by others, and I cite those sources. So those new to my channel, you're going to need to go back to those Anunnaki videos to see all this chronological material. Or I've been posting a bunch of it on Facebook too. Or you can go to archaix.com or in my published books. So 3439 BC is 1,200 years before the flood. This is 600 years plus 600 years. It's also 1,200 years after the Anunna rebel against this nemesis goddess. Yes, it's an isometric epicenter. It's 1,200 years going forward and backward that Enki appears. So 3439 BC appearance of Enki is also 18 centuries after the Nemesis cataclysm. That is 600 plus 600 plus 600 years. It is also 600 years after 4039 BC, when the moon first appeared and brought the Ogygian. Yes, this was the capture flood. So 3439, the calendrics are very interesting. So the ancients had access to all this calendrical data. They know at this time in history, in the pre-flood world, they knew the 600-year Anunna Nur was a viable calendar. It had proven over and over and over to them that it was viable, and that every 600 years was going to be some major event. They knew this. Now we're going to start seeing evidence that they began to discover that even the 60-year epicycles within the big cycle of 600 years was also very important. So the 3439 BC, this is the Nemesis X object, now completes its 792-year periodicity. Remember, in Anunnaki homeworld, I show that 792 years is the full periodicity of the appearance and disappearance of the Nemesis X object. But for 60 years each time, it's right there in the sky. And then for 732 years, it's gone. Just totally vanishes. When it comes back, it hangs around for 60 years. And this has been going on for like over 6,000 years. And it just keeps coming back. It's during these 60-year windows that there's a lot of exchange. So this is in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, and again in my other book, Return of the Fallen Ones. But for all our purposes right now, you need to know that the Nemesis X object, aka Nibiru, returns to our world and finishes from aphelion to perihelion. It finishes its cycle every 792 years. This was the 792nd year, the final year when Enoch Enki appeared among us. So the book of Jasher reads that, I'm going to read this, and in the days of Enosh, the Lord caused the waters of the Gihon to overwhelm them, and he destroyed and consumed them, and he destroyed a third part of the earth. And there was no food for the sons of men, and the famine was severe in those days. All right, this needs to be, we need to draw attention to this. Why would the book of Jasher focus on famine and food after a major destruction that just killed a third of the world's population? The key is vapor canopy. Guys, I am finding so much data on vapor canopies now. It is modifying my interpretation. The chronology has never changed. It's now modifying my understanding of what's happening in these different episodes. Yeah, guys, we haven't just had one or two vapor canopies in recorded history. I'm finding now we've had 4 or 5. And every time a vapor canopy collapses, it causes a great flooding, kills a lot of people. The whole world doesn't flood, but the whole world experiences flooding. So this this is what happened right here. This was a vapor canopy collapse. And remember, from what we have discovered in the year 1902, when 2 scientists in their late 50s and early 60s were on Mount Pelee in Martinique, looking at the after effects of the volcano that had just incinerated about 45,000 people at Martinique in the French Caribbean, that data is amazing because it shows us that ambient radiation can make a human, even an elderly human, grow 2 inches in less than 2 months. So vapor canopies, we already know, can appear rapidly, but they also disappear rapidly. And during the vapor canopies, which are created by volcanism, and everything that experiences this ambient radiation, then this explains why we had the Patagonian giants in very recent history when we had no evidence of a vapor canopy. They were there, though. They were documented by the Spanish conquistadors. They were amazed. People didn't believe that there was gigantic people were in South America like that. But we have too many testimonies. And we have anomalous skeletal finds in tombs, giants boneyards. We have so many things, so much corresponding evidence. There's so many Nephilim and giants books out. Not all of that is contrived. Yeah, there's many older books from the 1870s, 80s, and 90s that show gigantic skeletons before they were doing hoaxes, before all that crap happened. Before people were on YouTube trying to sell it to you that the 36-foot tall winged guy was an actual giant that they found. That's all the disinfo campaign to get you to disbelieve everything else. The giants we're talking about were 9.5 to 11.5 feet tall. So this what's going with that? These vapor canopies, the same thing Hesiod said. Hesiod mentioned the new age of heroes and giants, and it never made sense because he tucked it in between 2 of his 4 ages, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age. But in between the bronze and the iron, he tucked in another age called the age of heroes and giants. And it's never made sense. But at that exact same time in history, as I've shown in my presentations, we had the Ogygian deluge, which brought a 25-year darkness. It was almost the return of another vapor canopy. Just like in 522 AD, we had a 25-year Justinian plague darkness. All that's cover story, guys. I have a video that shows you the actual documents. You can read them yourself. Roman Catholic Church hid the Phoenix cycle of 552 years and created the very calendar that you and I live in right now, the Anno Domini calendar, to hide the fact that the Phoenix cycle and the Phoenix returned in 522 and nearly wiped the world out. It started a 25-year darkness. During that 25 years, all kinds of things happened all over the world, and it's been passed down to us as the Justinian period. All the tsunamis and earthquakes, the great darkness of 25 years, the plagues, epidemics, wars, all that stuff, guys. A lot of it is cover story for what really happened. But our calendar today, the AD calendar that you think goes all the way back to Jesus, no, it goes back to the Phoenix phenomenon of the year 522. Yeah, the records are amazing, guys. But anyway, we're not. That's a whole nother subject matter. I'm only saying that now because I'm starting to understand that these repeat floods that we've documented, these 5 great floods in recorded human history, no, there's more to it. It wasn't just a flood; it was the collapse of the sky each time. It was a vapor canopy collapse. So, this is what's being described in Jasher right here. This is why Jasher focuses on, and there was no food for the sons of men, and the famine was severe in that days. As soon as the vapor canopy collapsed, in 3439 BC, what do you think happened? What was available during the vapor canopy? Insects grew to huge sizes, rodents grew to huge sizes, small mammals, foraging creatures, predator, prey, everything grew to large sizes, plants grew to large sizes. We already know the trees and mushrooms are gigantic. So in that world, when the vapor canopy collapsed and we had all these fires and earthquakes and all in volcanism, after that, why did men starve? Because they weren't agriculturalists. They weren't growing anything. They didn't need to grow anything before 3439 BC because the historical record is very clear. Man lived off the land. Everything was available. It was like a Garden of Eden. You had plenty of fruit. You had bananas. Everything was available. And when insects were gigantic, if you needed meat, you could cook those. Food was abundant. It was everywhere. Only with the collapse of the vapor canopy and the appearance of deserts and all these different temperate landscapes, and you no longer had animal. And now there's a mass die-off of animals because with the collapse of the vapor canopy, what also happens? Atmospheric pressure decreases with the loss of oxygen. Now all these large creatures can't breathe. They just bam, they just lay down and die. And then they start spoiling because there's not enough other animals to eat them fast enough. It starts putrefying. With the collapse of the vapor canopy, the food sources are gone or they're minimized. And humans didn't grow anything. They didn't have anything. They had no crops. They didn't have anything. And this is why it answers another mystery from the ancient world. It's not a mystery that I invented. I have read about this in multiple different books, going back to the days of Langston and Lenormand and Ignatius Donnelly and Lewis Spence. These writers from the late 1800s were very clear that it was a historical and anthropological anomaly, that it can be affirmatively shown that agriculture, husbandry, canal works, farming, all this exploded in the 34th century BC, and there's no explanation why. Why all of a sudden, when we have no evidence whatsoever of the planting of wheat and cereals and cotton and the harvesting of honey, we have absolutely no records, no traditions, we have no archaeological evidence of vast farming and tilling the crops and husbandry, and we don't have any evidence whatsoever of ranching, just all this butchery, killing the bulls and the pigs, and we don't have any evidence of this until the 34th century BC. And then once the evidence is there, it's everywhere. It's almost as if all of this exploded onto the scene at the exact same time. And it's always been a mystery, because the uniformitarian model has always promoted that husbandry and farming and the tillage and all these things would have been very slow over a long period of time. But the uniformitarian model has hidden all the vapor canopies. It has hidden all the great floods. It has hidden all the chronology that we have from all the historical records and traditions and monuments and date stelae and cuneiform tablets. Uniformitarianism has ignored all the facts to promote an idea that everything that we have in the world is the byproduct of things that took hundreds of thousands of years to develop, and it's not true. As soon as the vapor canopy collapsed in 3439 BC, Enki was on the scene with Anuna in technologically advanced suits with seeds. They had farming equipment, they had everything. And the story is told in the book of Enoch. And the book of Enoch is very clear. When the Watchers appeared from on the side of Mount Ardus, they didn't come from the sky. The Nephilim didn't fall from the sky. There's no ancient aliens here, none of that. They came out of a mountain called Mount Ardus. And when they came, they had everything. And they instantly set to teaching the people on the outside who were suffering right after 1/3 of the world's population died in the Gihon flood. The Watchers appear and they teach metallurgy and the list of everything from husbandry to tillage, planting seeds, crops, everything. The whole list is in the book of Enoch that they taught ordinary humans. Taught ordinary humans all these things. The Book of Enoch answers the great anthropological mystery that these dumbass uniformitarians can't even see. The answer's right there in the historical record. Exactly what happened. The biosphere changed. Humans had access to everything, and then it collapsed. And when it collapsed, because of the Nemesis X object, when it collapsed, a new biosphere was here, less oxygen. Large creatures couldn't grow that big no more. Ambient radiation was no longer contained in a highly pressurized environment under an ultraviolet light, which was under the vapor canopy. All the conditions that make things thrive and grow to huge sizes were gone. And once they were gone, humans suffered. They starved because they didn't know how to plant. They didn't know how to do any of that. So the Book of Enoch chronologically answers perfectly the anthropological mystery of why the 34th century was an explosion of everything. Everything concerning human civilization, urban planning, canal works, farms, and ranching and all that. Yeah, guys, it's a huge mystery to anthropologists. It's been published in many, many papers and books. They can't figure it out. Jason of Archaix did because he read the Book of Enoch. All right. So, sorry if I go on the tangents, guys. Enoch had a John Deere. Man, it makes me like Enoch even more. Wow. So, anyway, this might be a long presentation, guys. It might be a long presentation because I barely even got started and I've already been running my mouth. So, there's a black scholar who translates the Sumerian, the Akkadian. I can't remember his name. Might have been Diop, might be somebody else. Somebody can help me with it, but he wrote a book. It's huge. It's called The Holy Tablets, where he goes through the Sumerian cuneiform, the Akkadian cuneiform. He even mentions a bunch of the Amorite material. I was very impressed with his stuff. He has some differences with Zechariah Sitchin that also impressed me. Well, in the Holy Tablets, he specifically mentions that the Akkadian text set aside a special period. A calendar was based on 60-year periods. Yeah, this is Diop of the Holy Tablets is the name of the book. But Zechariah Sitchin also remarks, as many of you have read this book with me, The Wars of Gods and Men, where that Sumerian text over and over referred to the starting point of Anunnaki history as 432,000 shars before the Great Flood. And in my other presentations, you guys already know, I've got challenges to anybody who wants to debate it. The 432,000 was turnings of the stars. That's all a shar means, is a turning of the star. It never meant year because shar is a unit. It's not anything specific. The reason we know this is because ships manifest found on cuneiform tablets also measure the weight of cargo in shars. Therefore, we know it's a unit and not anything highly specific. So 432,000 shars in this case was turnings of the stars. And we know this because that's 12 centuries. And that same 1200 years is found in Babylonian and Hindu records for the appearance of the gods before the cataclysm. So everything lines up chronologically absolutely precise because 432,000 divided by 360 days in a year, the ancient calendar, is precisely 12 centuries, 1,200 years. 360 is 60 times 6. This is also a part of that Sumerian sexagesimal system that we're getting into now, the elusive 60-year period. This was a part of a calendar introduced at this time. When this destruction occurred, 1/3 of the world died. They're paying attention now, okay? It's not just a 600-year period that we need to watch out for. It's a 60-year period inside of that. And this remains true for a very long period of time, as we'll see in this presentation. Magic Nova. Jason, what era are you most drawn to? You know what? The Roman Republic. Now, I'm not talking about the Roman Empire, and I'm not talking about the Roman monarchy, but the Roman Republic era. The Mediterranean world during the Roman Republic era is the most I'm more endeared with that. I would have liked to go meet like King Juba the First or King Juba the Second of Mauritania. I would have loved to sup at the table of Tigranes the Second of Armenian kings. I would have given my left eye to go sit at the table and kick it in the court of Mithridates the Fourth, of King of Pontus, and the Black Sea kings. Yeah, man, that's the time period there. That's the time period I'd be at. I'd go check out all the Etruscan art and all the Etruscan cities, and yeah, that's what I would have done. I would have had a blast back in those times. So anyway, let's go with okay, here's something interesting that Sitchin found in a cuneiform tablet. Sitchin wrote in the Wars of Gods and Men's that when Enki appeared, it says, Enki wrote this, when I approached Earth, there was much flooding. Now, the translation offered by Sitchin differs from what other Sumerian, like Samuel Noah Kramer and Marine Gallery Kovacs, have translated. When it says, when I approached Earth, there was much flooding, that is not the translation that is offered by others. Others talk about the word earth, Eretz, is describing the shoreline. Enki arrived by ship, by way of, other texts say he came by way of Dilmun. Dilmun was an island. It was like a staging area where the Anunna were sending fleets and provisioning, and then provisions from that island were sent to different Sumerian outposts like ancient Egypt. So yeah, when I approached Earth, there was much flooding. Zechariah Sitchin is trying to make it sound like Enki came on a spaceship. Nothing. There isn't a single Sumerian reference anywhere ever found or cited by anyone that says anything about spaceships, space flight, drop ships, drop shuttles, galactic, anything up there. Nothing. This is creative license. Just like Zechariah Sitchin said the word Shem was a word that meant rocket ship. It's not. Shem means name, as in your name. My name is Jason. My Shem is Jason. Or it means monument, as in a structure. And the two during the old Bronze Age period were interchangeable. The reason they were interchangeable is because many times in the Old Testament, Jacob even says, I built my Shem and I put my Shem on it. I built my monument and I put my name on it. And Jacob built a pillar to mark his land or to mark a covenant or a deal. And his pillar was his Shem. Well, the pillar is a monument that also has his name on it. So, yeah, there's no rocket in the word Shem. Zechariah Sitchin totally made that up. So we get to the year. Well, it's the same year, but it's a theologian named Leipzig. Dr. Seyfarth is a theologian in Leipzig. You have to forgive my Central East Texas pronunciation. I don't know. It's Europe, but Leipzig or Leipzig. But anyway, he's a theologian. Dr. Seyfarth published in the year 1900 in a book where he itemizes all this evidence showing that at this exact time in history, around 3446, which is a dead bullseye for 3439 BC, appearance of Enki. He says it's an approximate 3446 or thereabouts, there was a great flood that destroyed the world. That's pretty interesting. This book was published in the year 1900 by Dr. Seyfarth. But he says it was at that time that suddenly all the survivors began to learn alphabets. This is very interesting because this is what's in the book of Enoch too. In the book of Enoch, the Watchers appeared, and when they appeared, they taught men writing and the secrets of symbols and alphabets. It's all in the book of Enoch. So that's pretty interesting. Also, we have David Davidson, an engineer, 1929, published a book. I have it back here. Here it is right here. H. Aldersmith and David Davidson, The Great Pyramid, Its Divine Message. This book is gigantic. And it is packed. I showed you guys the charts in here before. In this book, this guy did a geometrical analysis of the Great Pyramid and determined that the civilization that built it encoded a geometrical timeline of world history in here that began in 4039 BC and ends, the geometrical timeline ends in the year 2045. This man was an engineer. He shows the math and he does not speculate as to what's going to happen. He just said that the Great Pyramid is a three-dimensional geometrical calendar of our world's history and future. And that future, the final year of the pyramid timeline, is 2045. So, pretty interesting book. But in that same book right there, right behind me, he also shows that approximately 3443 BC, which is a dead ringer, it's only 4 years off from 3439 appearance of Enki and the collapse of that vapor canopy, 1/3 of the world destroyed. Nemesis X objects, only 4 years off. But he specifically states that the descending passage in the pyramid, the descending passage at that time, not today, but at that time, would have pointed directly at the ancient pole star Alpha Draconis. It doesn't do that today because there's been a shift. The pole star today is Ursa Minor. It's the little bear, Polaris. It's not the eye of the dragon no more. Something has happened. The whole stellosphere has shifted. So, that's pretty interesting that he would talk about that. But that book, if you can get a hold of this book, you have 4 or 5 months of intense reading to do because it's in micro print. It's got pages that fold out, whole charts. Yeah, that book is a study. It will open your eyes up on how meticulous the research of the Great Pyramid has gone. It's far more meticulous than anything that I have conveyed to you. It is my discovery that all these measurements that he documented from the measurements of Sir Flinders Petrie, the most scientifically done to the thousandths of an inch, everything in the Great Pyramid are published in this book. But it's my discovery that they're almost all divisible by the number 138. He didn't even see that, but he saw many things that I would have never found had I not read his book. So, hey, anybody in the world today doing any type of research like this, doesn't matter if it's chronology based, geometrical timelines, gematria, doesn't matter what it is, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We do not have the intellectual capacity today that our forebears had, and this includes me. I do not have the mental faculties of the men who produce this research. I don't. So that's how amazing it is. So anyway, moving on. So in reviewing Zecharia Sitchin's work, we get to the year 3359 BC. 3359 BC is still 1,000 or so years before the Great Flood. But it's after this period when agriculture and these strangers appeared who came out of a mountain, and they're teaching all the common people everything on how to survive because they can't survive anymore. They used to just pick food off the trees or off the ground or catch their food, giant insects, and cook them and all, but not no more. Not no more. Now they're starving, mass dying. So agriculture, farming, ranching is being taught by these strangers who are regarded as benefactors. And in the Sumerian text, they're all tall and they're long bearded. But none of the indigenous people are. The indigenous people, the Sumerians, the Proto-Chinese, the Proto-Egyptians, the Melampides, they can't grow any facial hair. So they're learning from these people. And we find that in 3359 BC, according to Zecharia Sitchin's chronology, I'm about to explain that, Anu descended to Earth to oversee Enki's mining operations. This is really interesting. Sitchin notes that Enki's Anunnaki had been mining for 28,800 years. But we know this is a terrible, ridiculous notion. We know nobody was here mining for 28,000 years. This is the Billy Carson version of history borrowed from Zecharia Sitchin. It's bullshit. It's not true. You simply divide these Sumerian numbers by the sexagesimal system. 60 times 6 was 360 degrees of the celestial sphere. A shar was a turning of the stars around the eye of the dragon, 360 degrees. You simply divide 28,800 shars by 360, and you get your absolute number for what was going on. And in this case, it's 28,800 shars is only 80 years. That's plausible. 80 years the Anunna were mining for something on Earth. All right. Now, I'm not buying into the ancient aliens narrative. I'm not saying this is Zecharia Sitchin says that Anu descended to Earth, but he didn't. He descended out of a mountain because Anunna civilization wasn't on the surface. It was somewhere else. And they were using ordinary surface humans to do things. But at this time, what they were doing was so important that only Anunna were involved. And for 80 years, the Anunna mined, and then they rebelled. In the 80th year, they absolutely rebelled, and they weren't going to do no more of this type of work. So, 80 years after Enki's descent in 3439 BC, Anu appeared in 3359 BC. Now, Enlil was given command over the mining operation. This is the story we're told in the Sumerian tablets. This is the story of Zecharia Sitchin. Enlil's given command over the operation. And even Zecharia Sitchin says this is probably the source of Enki and Enlil's contention between each other. The decision to elevate Enlil over Enki is noted by Sitchin to derive from the fact that though Enki was firstborn of Anu, he was born of a concubine, while Enlil was later born of Anu's half-sister wife. Enlil was the robber of Enki's birthright. Sitchin correctly observes that Anunnaki considerations of succession were predicated upon genetic purity. That genetic purity was attached to the basically the female line, the matriarch. That was matriarchal. So we also know that the Anunna unions involve coupling and marrying one's half-sister. This is borrowed in Genesis when Brahma married Saraswati. Later, the Jews called it Abraham married Sarai. Sarah, later called Sarai, originally called Sarah. So, yeah, it's to the Anunna, the ultimate trespass would have been interracial coupling. So, this is the background to the story of what was going on. But it was 28,800 shars, which is only 80 years. So under Enlil, the Anunna themselves mine the ores, suffering for 40 counted periods. Now, nowhere does Zecharia Sitchin ever quote a source that said that it was 40 Nibiru orbits. Nowhere does he see no text in anywhere has ever said 40 orbits of Nibiru or 40. This was simply Zecharia Sitchin taking the 40 shars and then assuming a shar was 3,600 years, which was a terrible mistake. It was a mistake done by Berosus of Babylon, and it was copied by Zecharia Sitchin because it promoted the uniformitarian idea of world history, but it completely botched all the historical evidence. So his claim that the Anunnaki mined 144,000 years is absolutely preposterous. He got that by taking 3,600 years, a single orbit of Nibiru in his model, and multiplying it by 40. Sumerian text reads 40 counted periods. It does not read 40 orbits of Nibiru. So, and this is important, guys. Enki led the mining operations for 80 years, and Enlil took over for 40 more. It's as simple as that. 40 plus 80 is 120. It's a great shar. So, and that's when the Anunna rebelled. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that in a minute. We're going to have to put that on pause and put that aside because you're going to understand here how incredible that number is, 120. It's everywhere in Sumerian text in multiples, 120, 240, 480, 840. It just goes on and on and on. Multiples of 120. 120 is 60 years plus 60 years. This is what we're getting to. So we're going to move on to the year 3322 BC. The traditional founding of Chinese civilization by semi-divine amphibious beings who also invented the calendar. Now remember, when these things were written, they were written down well over 1,000 years after they had happened. Oh, wow. I got a refill. Thank you. Thing holds a lot, doesn't it? Hey, awesome. I'll drink to that. Man. So here's what we're looking at with when we read these primitive anecdotes, when we read these things that are injected into the historical record as something fantastic, like some Marvel comic version of history, it's you have to understand we are reading history that has passed through several filters. And when a civilization collapses, when it suffers a reset, the post-reset civilization doesn't instantly start writing these things. No, time passes. Oral traditions turn into literary works. Those literary works try to convey the historical details as best as possible. Amphibious beings only means they came from the sea. It's exactly what the texts say. They came by ship by way of Dilmun. But in the Chinese mind, centuries later, when these things were written, they became amphibious beings. But one thing that was really interesting is the Chinese were real quick to record a significant fact that these men brought the calendar. So the Chinese claim that these amphibious beings were led by a culture hero named Fu He. Now, we just read about Fu He a minute ago. Told you about Fu He. Fu He was a prophet. He was a culture hero. He had predicted that sometime in the far future, the Redeemer, the Holy One, the Savior was going to come because mankind was in a position that it required salvation. So this was the Chinese model. The traditional date for the appearance of Fu He out of the water to start the calendar was 3322 BC. He founded civilization. Remember, here it is again. Book of Enoch, Book of Jasher, they say the same thing. Book of Jubilees, it's the same thing. Watchers appeared, started civilization. Why? Because something had just happened and mankind was not able to feed itself. So this is what happened. So Fu He and his consort were named Nuwa. They repaired the heavens after a flood. This is the Gihon flood, 3439 BC, the collapse of a canopy. As civilization builders, they are often depicted holding a square and compass. All right, remember the Masons trace their origin back to the builders. Yeah, so Fu He measured the earth and the heavens by degrees, and he invented the calendar. To measure the heavens and earth by degrees, we are given the picture here that Fu He mapped out the longitude and latitude coordinates of the world. This is what he did. He imposed the grid on the world. And we're going to see that. We're going to see more evidence of this in a minute. So the Chinese are adamant that Fu He and his wife did these things before the reign of Yu. And that Yu, who was a flood survivor, is not to be confused with Fu He, who came a lot earlier. This is very interesting. The Chinese are adamant to declare here there's two floods being talked about. And the flood of Yu, which is considered by Chinese scholars to be equivalent to the great flood of the Bible, is not the flood of Fu He. That is amazing. It lines up perfectly with the Hebraic Jasher text and the Enochian records and the Jewish Hadaroth concerning and the Yazidis of Southeast was, I guess, Central Asia, Europe, of two floods in the ancient world, the flood of Noah being the second one. I believe it was Andrew Collins that drew our attention to the Yazidis, however you pronounce it. So, Fuhi was said to come down from on high, and his primary concern was to measure the dimensions of the world from east to west and north to south. Listen, the Chinese did not say that Fuhi came from the sky. The Chinese said he came down, though. Again, we have the same thing as the Book of Enoch. The Watchers didn't come from the sky. The Watchers came from Mount Ardis. They came out of a mountain. So, same thing, guys. So we get to the year 3319. This is 576 Annus Mundi, 576 years after the great Adam and Eve pole shift, the Adam and Eve reset, the Phoenix phenomenon date that was so terrible that the survivors thought that they were living in a new heavens and a new earth. Enter Genesis 1. So this is 576 years after that. This is 1080, 1080 years before the flood, and this is the 120th year since the Anuna arrived with Enki. 3439 BC Gihon flood. This is the 120th year after that flood. So, in the 120th year after their mining labors on Earth, 80 years under Enki and 40 years under Enlil, the Anuna rebelled, stopped laboring, rioted, and sought to kill Enlil, Lord Wind. Now, here's what's really interesting, guys. This event of the revolt of the Anuna and the attempt to kill Enlil, but not Enki. This was precisely 414 years before the Great Pyramid of Egypt project was begun in 2905 BC. Now, we're not going to get into it in this presentation. I have so many presentations showing you the exact time the Great Pyramid was built, how the Great Pyramid geometry even dates itself. All that's in there, guys. 2905 BC, the Great Pyramid was started. It took 1080 months to build. It took 90 years to finish. That's 1080 months. It was done in the year 2815 BC. And this has been published and it has been verified from multiple different sources and mathematical vantage points and chronological vantage points. It's amazing. You need to go to my Lost Secrets of Giza playlist to understand the dynamics of the Great Pyramid. It's not the subject of this video. But in this video, 414 years is interesting because the Anuna revolted 3 Phoenix periods. 138 years plus 138 years plus 138 years is 414 years. According to biblical chronologist Stephen Jones, was a cursed earth period. I have plugged his book many, many times, guys. It is fantastic. The Secrets of Time by Stephen Jones, biblical chronologist. He didn't know anything about the Phoenix, but he's got the Phoenix timeline down pat perfectly. So, anyway, this was 3319 BC. This was the 120th year of the Anuna mining. Whatever they were mining, whatever project they were doing, I don't know. But it was 3319 BC. Now, the holographic reflection to 3319 is 9133. It is the reverse of that number. And 9133 minus the 3319 BC becomes 5914. This is not an accident. It comes 5814. This is not an accident because the Great Pyramid is precisely 5,814 pyramid inches high. A pyramid inch is perfectly described in my published materials and in my videos. It's not an ordinary inch, although they're very, very, very close. But the pyramid has its own unit of measurement. It's found on a boss, on a granite leaf inside the antechamber. It is the focus of the antechamber. It shows a single unit of measurement, and that little unit of measurement is what everything inside and outside the Great Pyramid is measured in and is divisible by, and it's amazing. But it's called the pyramid inch. It's been known since the late 1800s. All right. But we already know about we already know that we live in the photo negative of a real reality. And we already know that the Great Pyramid geometry even gives us the hint to a higher dimension that we can't obtain physically, but we can intellectually. We can imagine these things. Great Pyramid offers us many of these chrono markers, and this is just one showing again that forward and backward in time, the Great Pyramid shows all these great resets, all these massive destructions. The entire Phoenix chronology is encoded in the Great Pyramid, all the way to the year 2040 and the year 2178. Yeah, we got all this is done. You've seen it in my presentations. If you're new to my channel, you have no idea what I'm talking about. You probably think I'm out of my effing mind. But I'm going to challenge you because the data sets are undeniable. If they weren't, there wouldn't be people in my chat feed right now. So, man, I love this. This beer stein keeps it hot. So we moved to 3175 BC. And bear with me, guys. This is going to be a longer presentation than usual. This is not going to stop at 2 hours. I got some truth bombs to show you guys. We are leading somewhere concerning the Ogygian deluge and how the entire world was caught flat-footed and was not ready for what happened in the month of May, 1687 BC, which started a 25-year darkness. They weren't ready. So, and there's a reason they weren't ready. They had been set up. I'm going to show you. 3175 BC, Sitchin cites conclusions of Maria Scholten de Ebneth, who published evidence that ancient South American ruins like Cuzco, Machu Picchu, Quito in Ecuador, Ollanta Tambo, Tiwanaku, were all a part of a grid pattern that, when measured against the obliquity, this is the tilt of the earth, revealed that the grid was established at or about 3172 BC. This is what I've been telling you guys. If something is true, you're going to see it from multiple different vantage points. This lady here in South America, looking at all these ancient ruins and all this stuff, measuring the ruins, looking at their alignments, realized that when you measure these things against the obliquity of the earth, then she factored all the way back to about the year 3172, according to the geographical distribution of all these ancient ruins. They're a part of a grid that was designed way back then. That's amazing. That's amazing that she would come to that conclusion when we just read the same thing concerning Fuhi and what he did. Created a grid pattern for the world at that time. That's amazing. It's amazing. So let's move on to 3163 BC. 3163 BC should be interesting to us because it's 276 Anuna arrival, meaning it's 138 years plus 138 years, the Phoenix number, from 3439 BC, the arrival of Enki and the Anuna. So, in the 45th year of the reign of Enoch, the Sethites erect several megalithic sites in the northern hemisphere after journeying from their homelands. This is in the book of Jasher, the 45th year of Enoch's rule. Not his age. So, now, the Carnac site in France is erected with multiple rows of megaliths as a calendar embodying the concept of a 360-day year. Newgrange is built in Ireland, a gigantic earthworks having geometrical alignments and parallels with Stonehenge in England. By the vernal equinox, Newgrange is finished. The builders then move to southern England and they erect Stonehenge 1. What you know of as Stonehenge is actually 4 projects. Stonehenge 1 is built, the first layering of Stonehenge, the great megaliths, they're put there in the 70th year of Enoch's ministry. Now, chapter 34 of the book of Enoch has a very curious passage, and it reads, "Towards the north to the ends of the earth. And I saw there a glorious device." That's exactly what he saw. Stonehenge was a device. It is a 3-dimensional lithic calendar. It is genius. I have decoded a lot of Stonehenge for you in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld. And I show you how each stone was a part of a lithic construct showing you the geometrical dynamics of our world. It's all encoded. Even the obliquity, the 360-day year, these things are encoded in the measurements of Stonehenge, and they're incredible. Stonehenge also records the focus of Stonehenge actually is the month of May. And you know what the month of May is about. It's the Phoenix phenomenon. So the place in Wales where the blue stones originated from, now you gotta understand, the blue stones that were added to Stonehenge in like Stonehenge 2 or Stonehenge 3, they're not from England. They're from Wales. Somebody took huge, heavy stones from Wales and transported them all the way down to Wiltshire and put them in the Stonehenge deal. But what's interesting is the area those stones came from, even today, is still called Carn Enoch. So further, the earliest name for the country around Newgrange in Ireland is Uriel. Do you guys see a connection here? In the book of Enoch, Uriel is one of the angels that divulge secrets to Enoch. So, Stonehenge long ago was associated, like it's mentioned by, I think it's Posidonius calls it the Temple of the Hyperboreans, but Stonehenge was actually associated to Saturn. Saturn was once called Kronos, Father Time, the god of time. But even deeper meaning to Stonehenge, in that it was linked to Saturn, is the fact that Saturn, it's the name Saturn itself is a derivative of Set. Set, as we have seen in my published books and in my videos, anybody can verify this when you're looking up encyclopedias, you will find the ancient Egyptian Set is a word that is interchangeable with Typhon. Typhon is the fiend, otherwise known as the Phoenix. All right, guys. Stonehenge was associated to the Phoenix, guys. It even pinpoints straight out the horseshoe, straight across the heel stone, the sunstone, the month of May. So, I've read Norman Lockyer's studies on Stonehenge, guys. It's deep. There's a lot of people out there trying to tell you Stonehenge is recent. It's not. A lot of black and white pictures floating around showing pieces of Stonehenge being moved, paper mache. They're all concrete and metal, and that part's real. Those pictures are real. But that was a rich woman in New York City who had a replica of Stonehenge put on her property. Yeah, a lot of people, these pictures that are roaming around, the actual Stonehenge in Wiltshire, yeah, it's been re-erected, earthquakes toppled, and they try to put it back together, and there's been refurbishing, but the site in the original site is very, very old. It's very ancient. It was very sacred to those people. Yeah, you gotta watch out, guys. This social media, especially YouTube, is just getting rife with people finger pointing, talking about everything's fake. And most of those people, the only thing that's really fake is their education. So it's crazy. So anyway, all right. There's a lot more about Enoch, guys. I'm paraphrasing. In my Chronicon, I have a whole lot more stuff about associations to Enoch in ancient Britain, Wales, Cornwall, England. Yeah, there's a lot. Listen, guys, even scholars agree. Scholars that have broke down the elements of the Book of Enoch and looked at the astronomy and the way the stars and the constellations are described in the Book of Enoch, even scholars have determined that the Book of Enoch could have never been written in the Mediterranean, Near Eastern world. It had to have been somewhere closer to the circumpolar stars. It is a book written in the far north. So, yeah. Told you this video was gonna have some truth bombs in it, guys. Told you. We're not, and we ain't even got to them yet, really. This is just the juicy stuff. We haven't got to the juicy stuff, like my boy Martin always says. All right. 3121 BC. Okay, during an agrarian phase, civilization, urban planning, canal work, cities are being mapped out, planned, gridded, colonization is happening. The Watchers have appeared out of a mountain and they have given civilization and they've been picking it up and it's been spreading. They've been taking the trade routes, everybody's sharing the information. Civilization is thriving and a new calendar is developed. It's called the Mayan Temple of the Cross calendar. It is the year 3121. BC. This calendar is attached to the idea of an 800-year-old goddess. Now, she's remembered all over the world, and she's remembered in her original form. Like, remember, the Anunna originally served a goddess. They did not serve a god. From the very beginning, the Anunna served a goddess. It was Nemesis, or a goddess that was referred to as Nemesis after she was found to not be able to save that world. I don't know. It's all speculation. But the Sumerian king list has 8 identities. One of them is female, a creatrix, a matriarch. She is the first. All that follow on the Sumerian king list are males. They're kings. There's 7 kings, but the 8th is a female, and the 8th is the first, and the riddle is found in the book of Revelation. There are 7 kings, 5 have fallen, and 1 is, and 1 is not yet come, but when he cometh, he must reigneth for a short while, and he is of the 8th, who is of the 7. Yeah, the riddle's in the book of Revelation. It's referring to the Sumerian king list. We're going to get to that in a minute. But in 3121 BC, the Mayan Temple of the Cross calendar was begun, an ancient American calendar concerning an 8-armed goddess. Yes, they called her Spider Grandmother. She was like an arachnid. She is remembered as Spider Woman, 8 legs in the ancient Americas. She is also Old Woman Weaver in the ancient Native American traditions. In India, the 8-armed goddess was Kali, and she was not originally evil. She was painted that way later because of what happened. But originally, Kali was not evil, but she had 8 arms. So, in the post-patriarchal takeover days of ancient Egypt, they had completely removed the references to Lady Beast with upturned snout, which is the Mayan name of her sigil. It was Lady Beast with upturned snout. That's the Mayan for this calendar. Mayan, it's a Temple of the Cross calendar. But the post-patriarchal takeover in Egypt had changed her identity to a man, and he was Scorpion King. But originally it was a goddess. That was just a patriarchal takeover, so they changed the female to a male. So the arachnid from the pre-flood world, the antediluvian world, the symbol of the Anunna, this spider symbol was very well known at that time. And it only changed. Well, when we hear things of Spider Woman and Old Woman Weaver and Spider Grandmother and Scorpion King, these are merely frames of reference that were imposed by later peoples trying to remember more ancient history. So we can forgive them for the almost silly childishness that it sounds like, but it's not. They're remembering something very sophisticated. So, this was 3121 BC, but it was right there at the exact same time. Enoch is ruling over 130 kings and princes. The same thing said in the Egyptian Coptic records about Surid. Surid was ruling over 130 nomes of Egypt when he got all the people together to build the Great Pyramid of Egypt before the flood. This is ancient Egyptian Coptic traditions. I even have the book right here. Somewhere in here, I have an amazing book that describes all of this. And if you guys act right, I'll do a video out of this book. But the entire book, wow. I got so many books, guys. I'm sorry. I just can't find it right now. But the entire book is nothing but all the ancient Egyptian, Coptic, Arabic and Muslim records concerning the Great Pyramid, and these are the ones that are ignored by the Western world. Western scholars, Western books don't quote these sources. But these sources were authentic because they were copied directly from books that were themselves extracted from the Alexandrian library before the Alexandrian library was put to the torch by both Christians and Muslims at different periods of time. This book cites sources that can be found nowhere else in the world, but they're genius. They're amazing in detail. I have this book in my library, and man, I can't remember the name of the book. Now that I mentioned it, it's killing me. And I know it's on this. You know what? It's probably not here. It's probably in my other studio. Yeah. Wow. So anyway, I will go get that book because I know y'all want to hear it. It's amazing stuff. I do cite some of those in my book, Lost Scriptures of Giza, and again in another book called Return of the Fallen Ones. I cite some of the like the ancient Arabic records on the Great Pyramid. It's amazing. It's amazing. The early Muslim scholars were all across the board in agreement that the Great Pyramids of Egypt were not Egyptian and that they were built before the flood. Yeah. So Western world authors, they don't do that, especially the Graham Hancock era crap authors all talking about 10,000 BC and 11. Every bit of that can easily be shown to go totally against all the historical written records we have today. Yeah. Guys, as a chronologist, I had to literally document all these chrono markers. So I have all the source materials. Those who have been watching my channel know this. Those who have read my books really know it. It says the source materials are overwhelming. And this is why there isn't a single person in publishing today that will debate me on these topics. They know that when they talk about Atlantis being at 9,600 BC, they're full of shit. And when they talk about the Great Pyramid being 10,000 BC, they're full of shit. When they talk about the Great Flood of Noah being, 12,000 BC, they're full of shit. None of that can be historically verified, and it's just the opposite. I can literally show 40 sources for every single pseudo source that they can provide. It's crazy, guys. It's overwhelming, the chronological data that we have. It's amazing that chronology is not taught in colleges. It's just amazing. So, One Tug's here. How you guys doing? Next time you come stateside, you got to come stay with us. All right, look. This was right before, guys, right before the founding of the Mayan long count. Here's another calendar, guys, another calendar. We already got Chinese references. We got Book of Enoch references. We've got the Sumerian references to calendars suddenly appearing in the world right after this Gihon flood during the reign of Enoch. Here's another one. 3113 BC, the Mayan long count. I am not going to beat you guys up with facts. I do that too many times. I have whole video presentations about the Mayan long count and a published book. So we're not going to go into it. But what I am going to say, this is one of the most startling calendars from the ancient world because it is not just a calendar. This calendar had no purpose other than to document something that had happened, which was 3113 BC. And then provide a countdown on a day count system of 1,872,000 turnings of the stars to a future event that future mankind must watch out for. They were so specific because the inventor of this calendar believed that there was 13 heavens, and that each heaven was represented by a cycle or an epicycle, and that this cycle was 400 years, and this 400 years was divisible by 360 turnings of the stars, meaning each cycle was 144,000 days. And when you take 13 cycles of 144,000 days, each one being a Mayan Bacton, it adds up to 1,872,000 days in the future when an event would occur when the calendar zeroed out at what's referred to as 13.0.0.0.0. That's when the 1,872nd day is complete. November 1st in the year 2046. This is evidence of a very technologically advanced, sophisticated ancient civilization. This isn't a normal calendar. It is an apocalypse countdown. It is a warning to future generations. What does the Book of Enoch say? What does the Book of Jasher say? What does the Egyptian Coptic records of Surid, builder of the Great Pyramid, say? They all say the same thing because they're all concerning the same individual, Enki, Enoch. And they say very specifically that not only did he invent the calendar, not only did his people come bring civilization, but his ministry wasn't even for his day. They are all in agreement. The Coptic accounts, the Jasher accounts, the Midrashic accounts, and the Book of Enoch accounts all say the same thing. His ministry was for a far distant generation in the last days. That's compelling. In order to preserve a message for the last days, you would need to build a monument sufficient to survive every world destruction until that period of time, and be recognizable as a message by those who were qualified to discern it. That's what the Great Pyramid is, guys. Got a whole playlist about the Great Pyramid and what that message is. So, anyway, that's right, Jamie Robbins. Great Pyramid's technolithic. It's not Heliolithic. Heliolithic came after the collapse of the vapor canopy in 2239 BC. The Great Flood collapse of the canopy started the Heliolithic maritime empire. AJ Fortuna, how you doing, bro? All right. So that's the Mayan long count. And the Mayan prophecies that attach to the long count say that specifically when we reach 13.0.0.0.0 and the 13 Bactans have run their course, which is our November 1st, 2046, when that day comes, an invasion of demons from the underworld will come up. For a short period of time, they will come up. It also says that time will collapse. This is coming from a prophet who invented calendars. Time will collapse. What does that mean? I show you in Anunnaki Homeworld exactly what it means in my book. Because when time collapses, that means our present day and year will have no meaning. That doesn't mean we're going to cease to exist. It means that the book of Revelation contains the key, just like it does about the 7 kings. It contains the actual key to decipher what the end of the Mayan long count is about. What happens in the book of Revelation? 200 million demonic-looking things with faces of men and wearing chitinous armor come from the underworld and attack the surface. That's exactly what happens in the book of Revelation. It's clear as day. Apollyon is released after the seventh seal. Seventh seal is broken. Apollyon, who's the first seal, after the seventh seal, he's released from the pit. When an angel is given a key to the bottomless pit, it's open. The portal is open, and Apollyon, the destroyer, who in ancient Hebrew writings was called El Shaddai, when he is released from his prison and he is given reign over the earth, and the beast kingdom begins after 2046. We are told in the book of Revelation, in the second trumpet judgment, that wormwood, an object called wormwood, will appear in the sky. And when it does, it will reduce the day, the night, the sun, the moon, and the sky by a third. How do you do that? How do you reduce all 5 of those by a third? It's very specific, because the sun concerns daytime. The sun is an object and the moon is an object, but daytime is a concept. Nighttime is a concept. The stars are objects in the night sky. It was very specific about those 5 things because it wanted you to know this was very literal. This was not a metaphorical change in the calendar. Time collapses because if you take a third out of a day, you no longer have 24 hours. You have a 16-hour day. That means the sun is moving far faster across the sky. If you take a third of a third of the sun, that means something is obscuring it and it's no longer near as bright. Same as the moon. The moon dulls. It's now being obscured. It's no longer near as bright. The stars are disappearing. They're no longer bright. We have the return of a vapor canopy. What happens right before the second trumpet? The sixth seal. And everybody knows who's read all my published books and watched 80-something of my videos on the Phoenix phenomenon. You got to know by now, the sixth seal is the return of the Phoenix phenomenon. That's what the sixth seal is. According to Mother Shipton and Nostradamus, it's dead ringer for 2040. 2040 is on the 138-year Phoenix periodicity. It all lines up. If you're new to my channel, I probably sound like a madman to you, but there's at least 500 people in this chat that can educate you that all these data sets are available for everyone. And not one single researcher in the world has ever stepped up and tried to debate me about the existence of the Phoenix. None. And they're not going to. It's too much overwhelming data. It's easier to ignore me than it is to challenge. There's too much data to go through. So this the sixth seal, the breaking of the sixth seal is a return of the Phoenix phenomenon. Right after that, we have a vapor canopy coming, and our world is fundamentally changed. Now we can't measure the day the same or the year the same. Everything's changed. The Maya prophecies are fulfilled. Time has collapsed. It's become something else. So that's 2040. So we need to move. We need to move to the next calendar. Just right after that, within 10 years during the reign, thank you, Dave B. Just 10 years within the reign of Enoch. Again, another calendar of the ancient world suddenly appears. We have to pay attention because now this is the Kali Yuga calendar of ancient India, known as the Black Age. It is the emergence of the eight-armed goddess. Now, later in history, she became a bloodthirsty queen. But the earliest representations of Kali almost have her as a creatrix. So there wasn't anything bloodthirsty about her. Now, her symbol is an upside-down pentagram. That does not mean anything evil. That symbol is found in Sumerian text. It's a pentagram. It is a what is it called? A logogram, a Sumerian logogram called an Arab. I have 2 or 3 pages in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, that show you what the Arab is. The ancient syllable R and the ancient syllable UB. And everywhere they're found in the Old Testament. It's like a code. It's amazing. With the five-pointed star, Arab in Sumer, and all the connotations found in the Old Testament give you the picture of something falling out of the sky to break up the ground. And the Sumerians called the pentagram the plow. It's the plow sign. The Sumerian Arab was the concept. Anytime you saw a 5-pointed star on Sumerian text, it was the dingir, a god who plows up the ground by striking it with an object. Remember, guys, in the Old Testament, God is going to reap the harvest. The world is his field. The plow is something he sends to break up the field when the harvest has been, after the harvest has been reaped, because you got to break up the ground to start over. But before the ground is broken up to start over, what does God do? He sends his ministers in to go pull, to keep them from the evil to come, to pull all his children. Call it the bridegroom. Whatever your religious preference is, it's the same story. The elect, the chosen, the redeemed, the errants, whatever, they are harvested and removed to a place of safety. And then something comes, the plow of God comes to break up the field, because in breaking up the field is necessary, because you got to kill everything there so it can become fertilizer to grow a new world. So this is the Sumerian concept of the Arab. And the pentagram is found. You can read about it in my books. But anyway, let's see. Oh yeah, Kali is the same as Scorpion King, the same as old woman weaver, spider grandmother, spider woman. It's just the same one. But here's what's really interesting, guys, and you can't get around this. Anybody can verify this. In ancient Sanskrit, the word Kala, K-L-L, it's K-A-L-A. In ancient Sanskrit, the word Kala is amazing. Remember, this is the Kali Yuga. But the word Kala in Sanskrit is time. Again, we have a reference to an ancient calendar that counts down to a future event concerning something in the reign of a prophet king whose ministry was not for the people of his time, but was using the people of his time to construct a monument that would survive every cataclysmic reset all the way to the last days, so the generation of the last days could decode it to understand how they could become a part of the harvest and not a part of the field. This is the message, guys. Now, the date 3100 BC is the time also assigned by Egyptologists to the rule of Narmer. This is the Narmer palette. I've gone through this in my presentations too. Now, Narmer was the one that unified the Egyptian kingdom. Narmer, he unified the upper and lower Egypt. So, and remember, if you've read the book of Jasher, you'll know that Enoch was the one that unified all the 130 kings and princes. But in the Egyptian Coptic version, it was Surid, builder of the Great Pyramid, a prophet before the flood who had unified all 130 of the nomes of Egypt. It's the same story, just from a different perspective. Okay, so the word Narmer is very interesting because Nar and Ner are interchangeable, and remember, Ner refers to the 600. It's a calendrical. It's a calendrical reference. The Anunnaki Ner was 600 years. This is why the Anunnaki are often called the Ner, or translated the 600. So it's a Narmer and Ner, we're talking about the 600, but what's really interesting is Mer, M-E-R, is the ancient designation for pyramid. So we have the pyramid referring to the 600. And 3100 BC is really interesting because this is the main date. You see all these encyclopedias, all these Egyptological writings, and all these scholarly papers on ancient Egypt that talk about Narmer. 3100 BC is the date they all use, which is interesting. It is exactly the 108th year of Enoch's reign. Probably totally coincidence, but I like it. You guys know what 108 is. Now we have to recap just a few points. It is to be noticed that between 3163 BC and 3103 BC, these last four items I shared with you guys, the world's most mysterious and well-preserved calendrical systems were all begun. This is just a short little period of time, guys. It's 60 years. But in this 60 years, in 3163, Newgrange and Stonehenge, which are lithic devices to interpret time. Enoch was 110 years old when those were built. So 3121 BC, the Mayan Itza Temple of the Cross. Enoch is now 152 years old. 3113 BC, the Mayan long count is founded. Enoch is 160 years old. 3103 BC, the Vedic Kali Yuga calendar begun. Enoch is 170 years old. I find that interesting because 170 years is 2040 months. Now, it is not without significance that the three timelines from 3121 BC to 3103 BC all began within 18 years of each other. The last three items were all within 18 years. So all these calendrical systems, they all employ the main common denominator of 144,000 days. This is where the ancient Hindus messed up when they, after a post-cataclysmic time period, after 1687 BC, the Ogygian deluge, the people in India were trying to put their histories back together. And when they did, they had They had mistaken and thought that these huge numbers they were seeing in their older monuments and traditions and texts were talking about years. So they too made the mistake of 144,000 years, 288,000 years, 432,000 years, 648,000 years, 720,000 years. No, all those numbers are in the yugas, but it's just days. And each one is divisible by 600 years, an Anunnaki ner. So it's it's all easy. Calendars are really easy once you understand the only denomination that was known in the pre-flood period was days. This is why Genesis is very specific. The evening and the morning was the first day. Genesis is very specific. When animals were created, the evening and the morning was the fourth day. When mankind was created, the evening and the morning was the sixth day. Genesis is so specific, and God decided that everything was good and he wanted to rest, and the evening and the morning was the seventh day. So I'm not saying that the world was created in 7 days. I'm saying that the author of Genesis understood that the day count system was the one that was used back then. This is why you never have references in the older biblical text to these were the years of Abraham, these were the years of Shechem, these were the years of Abimelech, and in the years of Saul. You don't ever have references like that. Everything is, and in the years of Abraham, and in the years of Adam, and in the years of, you have the days, in the days of Noah, in the days of Shem, and even in Babylonian writings, you have in the days of Semiramis, in the days of Merodach, in the days of Amraphel. You don't have references to years, and the reason is because the day count system was prevalent in ancient times, and then after a cataclysmic period, nobody really understood the older records. So when they started rewriting everything, now all of a sudden they've got yugas in India going back millions of years, and it's totally ridiculous. And because Buddhism stems from Hinduism, and the Hindu scholars got so many of these chronological facts wrong, now the Buddhists believe that all these events happened hundreds of millions of years in the past. They even expanded on it even more. So it's like I said, it's very simple. Most truths are very simple. Once you reduce everything to its lowest common denominators, you will find that almost all the calendars of the ancient world are day count calendars, and that they easily line up with each other perfectly, as I've shown in hundreds of my charts. They all line up perfectly once you reduce them to those denominators, because that's the denominators that was intended to be used when they were developed. So, and I'm going to show you more proof, a lot more proof. Like right now, here's some proof. Here's proof of it right here. 3039 BC. This is 800 years before the great flood of Noah, 2239 BC. This is the 1000th year since the moon appeared, the capture flood in the year 4039 BC. Now, this is also the 400th year since the arrival of the Anunna in Enki. So Sitchin wrote that 288,000 years before the flood, the Anunnaki manufactured mankind. Now, he's stuck on this 288,000 year theory, which is preposterous. We already know this, because 288,000 shars, turning of the stars, around the eye, Alpha Draconis, the eye of the dragon, is just 800 years. That's it. Because 144,000 days, like a Mayan Bacton, is just 400 years. It's 400 times 360 days. It's that simple. So the same 800 years is attested to in the Native American lore. We've already covered that before concerning Spider Grandmother and Spider Goddess and all that. It's also in the Sumerian king list. It's the same thing. It's the Mayan. It's a temple of the cross. The goddess was 800 years old when she appeared. Every bit is the same. It's the same. So Zechariah Sitchin wrote that the Adamu, which is the name of original humans on the surface world, were created as laborers 80 SARs before the flood. 80 shars. And he says these 80 shars was 288,000 years. It's ridiculous. Because if you're going to use a flood as a date monument, if you're going to use it as a date moniker, then 288,000 years is ridiculous, because in that period of time, realistically, there would have been thousands of great floods. So, no, we have to employ Occam's razor and all these things, because none of that. We have no evidence whatsoever of Sumerian cities like Bad Tabira and Larak, Lothal, Shurapak. We don't have any of these. Eridu. We don't have any evidence of these cities being 250,000 years ago, which is stupid. But we have a lot of evidence that they were just 5,000 years ago, which is easy if you apply Sumerian sexagesimal system to the Sumerian text and not Zechariah Sige's interpretation. So 80 SARS is easy. So we move to 2969 BC. The Sumerian king list records that Enmedaranki reigned 21,600 years in the city of Sippar. There isn't a single city that can survive that long. Sooner or later, something ecological is going to destroy that city. It's going to disappear into a sinkhole, mud flood, earthquake, bolide, something. It's going to get burned multiple times. It's going to be destroyed by enemies. There is just no way, man. The probability ratios basically mandate that that's not going to happen. Nothing's going to survive that long. Everything morphs into something else. Everything changes position. There's no way anything's going to stay like that. 21,600 years is bullshit. It's shars. 21,600 shars is a very short period of time. The Sumerian king list records that Enmedaranki reigned 21,600 shars in the city of Sippar, and that Enmedaranki was the seventh in line. Who else was the seventh in line? As a matter of fact, where's my phone at? I'm about to tell you right now how long Enmedaranki ruled. Here it is right here. 21,600 divided by 360. Well, look at that. Enmedaranki ruled for 60 years. There's that number 60 again. 21,600 shars is 60 years that Enmedaranki, the seventh in his line, ruled in the city of Sippar. What do we know about the city of Sippar? The city of Sippar was the library city. It was the city where all the knowledge was stored. Who also was the seventh in his line? Enoch. Enoch was the seventh in his line, and he was a king as well. So here we have a reference to Enoch in the Sumerian king list, who ruled 60 years over the city of books. So it's pretty interesting, guys. But it is beyond explanation as to how so meticulous a scholar as Zechariah Sitchin could have missed this point. Why he continually tried to basically sell it to us that all this was so far in the past. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous, guys. It's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy, guys. And I stick to the chronology, dude. I don't give a damn about the genealogies, and I don't give a damn about all the interrelationships, man. You got a lot of people, I see some in the chat, you got a lot of people that are really hung up on who's related to who in the ancient Akkadian and the Sumerian text. Listen, those texts are a mess. They are written by people hundreds of years after the events they depict. So many genealogies and many of these things, just like in the 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century, genealogies were invented. Just like when I can't even pronounce it, the I can't even pronounce this, English kings that usurped the throne of England and they're ruling today. All our presidents are related to them. The Plantagenets, some French name, I can't remember, but it's the same thing. Genealogies are invented for socio-political reasons. Same thing, nothing has changed. Same thing happened in the ancient times. So it's crazy. This is why I stick to chronology, because numbers don't lie. But text and traditions and events, and you got to get through all this socio-political crap that was introduced in the ancient world. Why Enki was more superior to Enlil, or why Enlil was actually more favored than Enki. All this stuff is socio-political. They had the same envies and jealousies in the ancient world that we do today. So I don't buy into all that crap. But yeah, that duplicity is amazing. It fits a uniformitarian mold. I'm going to tell you now, guys, Mr. Sitchin, he literally cherry picked his divisors to suit his theories. He chose the hundreds of thousands and the 10,000 interpretation of the Shar only because it promoted uniformitarianism. And when you promote a chronology that goes so far back in history, how's anybody gonna try and take it apart? We have no archaeology for that. It's like claiming Atlantis was 9,600 BC when the Atlantis story involved the Greeks. And the Greeks aren't 9,500 BC. The Egyptians aren't 9,600 BC. We didn't have tin mining. We didn't have bronze. We didn't have iron in 10,000 BC. All the chronological markers that are found in Plato to identify the exact time of the Atlantis narrative are totally ignored by everybody who promotes this bullshit about Atlantis being 9,600 BC. They all quote the one mistake that even scholars in Plato's day corrected, that it wasn't 9,000 years because the Egyptians didn't count years. It was 9,000 moons. And you guys already know, if you've downloaded that free PDF, I have a free PDF that cites all the sources of all the scholars that Graham Hancock has to ignore and pretend he's never read in order to put that bullshit out about 9,600 year BC Atlantis. Yeah, just like yeah, that's crazy how many people believe that shit. It's crazy. It totally goes against the historical record. Everything Plato said about Atlantis was 13th century BC, easily proven. So, same thing Sitchin did. Sitchin's anachronisms are unforgivable. Yeah, nothing relative to the human experience today happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. The Shars were days, not years. As simple as that. So, here's another one. The Sumerian king list text WB62 is kept in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, and it states that Zusithra, I think that's his name, Zusudra, who's the flood hero. He's Noah. He's Atrahasis of the Atrahasis epic. He's the flood survivor. So it says before the flood, he reigned 36,000 Shars. Guys, come on, man. 36,000 Shars, turning of the stars, is only 100 years. So it makes it more visible. And this is exactly what we find in the Epic of Gilgamesh. I read the Epic of Gilgamesh probably 20 years ago, but I still remember in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it specifically says that Utnapishtim, who is the Sumerian Noah, told Gilgamesh, the hero of the epic, that he was the king of Shuruppak, the city of Shuruppak before the flood. I can easily see Noah as ruling 100 years. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with Sumerian kings living for hundreds of thousands of years. Got a problem with that. So now we move on to 2944 BC. 2944 BC, the Chinese Shu King text relates that Fuhi lived an Oriental Noah. That's pretty damn close. Pretty damn close. This anachronism conveys that some ancient Chinese chronicler knew the duration of Noah's life being 950 years, and that this chronicler began that 950 years around the start of a calendar that this chronicler had access to, similar to the Annus Mundi calendar. Now, the reason I say this is because this is the year 951 Annus Mundi, when the Chinese claim, which is our 2944 BC, the Chinese claim that this flood hero lived. That's real interesting. That's super interesting, because it shows that they had a corpus of material, chronological material available to them at the time, and all they did was get the start date wrong, but they had the number right. And that's really interesting to me. So that's Chinese. Again, we have crossover with the Chinese traditions. This is the Chinese Shu King text. It concerns Fuhi. So remember, Fuhi was a flood hero as well, but he wasn't you, who was the survivor of the Great Flood. It was the flood before that. So we move on to 2895 BC. Egyptologists using approximates calculate their Egyptian Sothic chronology as marking about 2895 BC. This is only 10 years off as a momentous event The 10 years that it's off is the start of the building of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, which was called the land of Syriad at that time. So 2852 BC, an ancient Chinese prophet in this year taught people how to write. This is of particular interest because it was at this time that the lower multi-ton white limestone casing blocks were being prepared and dressed, with writings being placed upon them during pyramid construction. This knowledge was written by Enoch. For those of you who don't know, there are a lot of traditions from the ancient world that say that the lower 1/3 of the casing blocks that went up to the Great Pyramid were covered in white writings on white limestone. And you had to get close to see them. They weren't etched in. It was like some type of light was burned into the surface stones. Now, there's a researcher named Tony Bushby who has gone into great depth explaining that some of these white limestone casing blocks have been found in a Muslim mosque in Cairo, and that most of that rock was all crushed up and it was all broken up or hauled away and might have been taken by someone. But a lot of that was used for ballast under roads and to build a famous, I think it's the Mosque of Hassan I can't remember all these names, but in Cairo. Well, Tony Bushby published a book where they were using some type of radio spectrometry, and they were looking at fragments of the casing stones that they had found, and they saw those writings on that. It's pretty interesting. But anyway, it doesn't even matter because after 4,800 years, nothing's going to survive on the outside of those surfaces anyway. But they were there at one time because this is in almost all the ancient texts concerning the Great Pyramids that they were covered in writings. So move on from that. And I find it interesting that the Chinese were talking about this as well during the time the Great Pyramid was being built. So the first dynasty of China, sit here founded in 2852 BC, during the building of the Great Pyramid. The first dynasty of China was the dynasty of the 5 monarchs, but actually there was 9 rulers during this time. And the Chinese claim that their very first dynasties were 646 years. This is very close to the 670 years of the Sumerian king list, which is, according to the Sumerian prism, 241,200 shars, which is precisely 670 years on a 360-day count. So we have a Chinese reference here to a dynasty that was existing, the Dragon Kings, which just meant their dragon-faced means to be bearded. So the Dragon Kings were ruling at the exact same time that the 7 kings were ruling Sumer. Therefore, I have to conclude, since proto-hieroglyphs, Proto-Sumerian looks just like ancient Chinese hieroglyphs, I have to assume that the scholars are correct. There is a common origin between the ancient Chinese and the ancient Sumerians. So I will defer to them because there's some really good studies about their the development of Sumerian and Chinese pictographs and how they obviously came from the same parent source. So Ignatius Donnelly in the 1800s wrote that the early history of China indicates contact with a superior race. Fu He, regarded as a demigod, founded the Chinese Empire in 2852 BC. He introduced cattle and taught the art of writing. Remember, people were starving after a cataclysm. The vapor canopy collapsed. All this flooding happened. People couldn't feed themselves. Why? Because they never learned how to do it. During the vapor canopy, food was everywhere. So, all right. Oh, Boba Fett. Boba Fett's in the chat. Wow. Probably using that Boba Fett deal, man. Probably one of my former haters up in the chat trying to hide. Knowing you're going to get me with that Star Wars. 2839 BC. This is a key year in calendrics. Why? Because it is 600 years before the flood. That's the Anunnaki Nur, 600 years before the flood. It is 24 centuries exact after 5239 BC, the Nemesis Cataclysm. This is 600 years 4 times over. to this year. It is 1,200 years, 600 plus 600, from the capture of Luna, the capture flood, the year the moon appeared. So this is also 600 years after the appearance of Enki in 3439 BC with the Anunnaki. This is a huge, huge year. So priorly in 3439 BC, exactly 600 years earlier, the Anunnaki Watchers traded knowledge for the daughters of men. But now, in 2839 BC, during the reign of the seven kings, now the Watchers, a special branch of the Anunnaki, they take human females by force from their fathers and husbands. They practice hybridization between species of animals and plants. The oldest stories of the Chinese concern the dragon kings who founded the first Chinese dynasty. They descended from heaven. In Chinese version, they descended from heaven and they had flying machines. Same thing we find in the Hindu and the Vedic. They didn't come from heaven. They came from the sky in Vimanas or Vimanas. I don't know how to pronounce it, but these are flying machines that are described in Hindu texts. So the founder of this dynasty was called the son of the red dragon. The dragon kings were the firstborn sons of heaven and earth, An and Ki, Anunnaki. Now, so the same story is told in archaic records of India, and these machines that flew people around were called Vimanas. I just said that. So this begins a 600-year reign of terror. This is the birth of Noah in the first year of the oppression of the Nephilim. This mirrors what the Jews invented way later concerning Moses being born in the first year of the oppression in ancient Egypt. When Moses was put on a basket and all that. But they got that story from Sargon the Great of Akkad. That was his story. He was a baby. They're going to kill him. They put him in a little reed basket and put him on the Euphrates River or on the Tigris River. And a woman, an Enaitu priestess who had not known a man, had found him. And therefore, he was able to be raised up among the nobility and claim that he had no father and only an earthly mother. Therefore, he was 2 parts God and 1 part man. This is the famous story of Sargon, who was later known as Sharrukin, and Sharrukin was later called Naram Sin by a post-cataclysm culture. He went by many names in ancient times. You have seen him on the stele of Naram Sin. He is the giant wearing the horns and killing men that are half his height. Yeah, all on the mountain. You've seen him. The same guy. So, where we at? Okay, that was, okay, so anyway, in the year 1895 of our calendar, not even, a little over 120 years ago, in 1895, historian J.D. Parsons wrote that Noah's birth was on the cusp between 2 600-year periods, and that the 600-year period is not known in astronomy, and astronomers don't know of any astronomical cycle that's 600 years. However, J.D. Parsons reveals in his book that for some unknown reason, the 600-year great year was widely known in ancient texts. That's interesting. It's an Anunnaki nerve. This is from a book from 1895. So, in the Lamech scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the birth of Noah troubles Lamech, who claims the child is not his. He blames his wife. His wife is named Bad-Tabira, and he blames his wife of having sex with one of the sons of God, the Watchers. So she cries foul, says it's not true, she didn't do it, and they call for Lamech's father, Methuselah. And Methuselah comes and sees the strange child, and wait a minute. Yeah, the father was Methuselah, and they come and they decide, hey, he tells Lamech you need to name him Noah, and because he was going to be the progenitor of a whole new race. And Methuselah saw that the child was very different. So, yeah, I go into it in other videos, but there are a lot of traditions about the switching out of babies. There's a lot, especially in fairy lore. Yeah, in the medieval times, women used to sleep with their babies, watch them like a hawk, because it was widely known that the fairies would come at night and switch their babies out with babies that were not really theirs. And the fairy babies didn't act like human babies. And yeah, it's we'll get into that some other time. So 2800 BC. Dr. R.M. de Jong, I like this guy. He wrote an awesome book on all kinds of ancient archaeology in the Americas, and he even gave me a lot of my Phoenix data for the year 445 BC. But R.M. de Jong wrote, the circumference of the Earth was very accurately known by circa 2800 BC. So Richard L. Thompson, he's a PhD in mathematics. He found that numerous texts from ancient India gave accurate dimensions for the diameter of the Earth and even the plane of the ecliptic. Now, this is really interesting because 2800 BC was the 15th year of the completion of the geodetic monument known as the Great Pyramid in Egypt. So to see independent information here that the ancients were very technologically advanced and very sophisticated in their astronomy and geodetics is really interesting to see this cross-referencing here. Year 2778 BC. This is the start date for the Egyptian short chronology. Now, remarkably, it's only 37 years after the completion of the Great Pyramid. 2699 BC. In 2699 BC, we have the 414th year of the Mayan long count. This is the cursed earth chronology of biblical chronologist Stephen Jones in his book, The Secrets of Time. 414 is 3 Phoenix periods of 138 years each. This is the traditional beginning of Chinese civilization. The ancient Chinese calendar now begins. They're no longer in the mythological age. Now Chinese history begins, not tradition. Chinese admit that they have a traditional period that antedates Chinese civilization. Here's where Chinese civilization begins, with the Chinese calendar in 2699 BC, which is attached by the Phoenix number to the Mayan long count. I find that interesting. Historians have for a long time recognized the links between the ancient Maya and the Chinese. So, ancient Chinese text, Nai Xing, which is the Book of Medicine, dates to this period, 2650 BC, containing modern diagnoses and treatment plans. This is amazing. An ancient Chinese pre-flood text dated to this period, basically of modern medicine. Things, not much has changed. But to have the book of there's also a book of maps from ancient China that's also very interesting. They had surveyed North America and given a lot of geographical data. It's pretty interesting. I believe that I got that information from a book called 1421, which is about Chinese fleets sailing around the world acquiring all this data. So, all right, where am I at? Make sure my audio's still going. I'm not talking out my ass. Also, we're getting to the meat and potatoes of this presentation, but I did warn you from the beginning it was going to be longer than usual because this is, like I said, this entire presentation was inspiration just grabbed me so you could see what I see about how these ancient civilizations completely missed the Phoenix phenomenon that wiped them out in the month of May of 1687 BC. They were caught flat-footed by the Ogygian deluge, despite a long history of recording all these resets and cataclysms. They had the science, they had everything, and they still got caught flat-footed. I'm going to tell you why. All right. So in 2637 BC, Robert Temple, in the Serious Mystery, found that the Celts, Greeks, and ancient Chinese and Egyptians, all highly regarded, a 60-year period in antiquity. It was a part of their calendar structures. Now, learning from an old obscure book from 1827 written by George Higgins titled The Celtic Druids, Robert Temple noted that Stonehenge and other British stone circles all encoded a 60-year period. What I just tell you about Stonehenge, Newgrange, Karnak, yeah, they were all built during the reign of Enoch. They were all built when all these ancient calendars suddenly all started. Same thing. So here we have independent confirmation of basically the same thing. The 60-year period was noted. The Sumerian sexagesimal system was a part of the Anunnaki neurochronology. So, citing Chinese historian Dr. Herbert Chatley, he notes that the 60-year period venerated in early China found its origin about 2637 BC. That's amazing. While this dating is an approximate, attached to a definite, it lies but 10 years away from 2647 BC, which was the appearance of the Nemesis X object again, 792 years after it appeared in 3499 BC. Can't make this stuff up. This chronological synchronicity goes through my entire work, Chronicon. It's all synthetic. Don't have to change a single date. It's amazing. So Plutarch wrote that the number 60 is the first of measures for those persons as concern themselves with the heavenly bodies. The number 60. So he also wrote that the early Egyptians represented the 60-year cycle as a crocodile, an astronomical symbol. Why would they do that? What was the main thing the Sumerians looked up at the sky when they measured stars? Turnings of the stars around Alpha Draconis was one day. One turning of the stars at night signified a day. The Alpha Draconis is Eye of Draco, Eye of the Dragon. To the Egyptians, a crocodile is a dragon. They're counting crocodiles. 60 crocodiles was a cycle. So the Mongols, the Manchu, and the Tartars of Asia all employed 60-year cycles. That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Some sinologists believe that the Chinese culture originated in Mesopotamia. Even today, the Chinese syllabary is based on signs fundamentally similar to the old Sumerian pictographs. The old Sumerian pictographs. In structure, Proto-Sumerian resembles Chinese and Turkish. Can't make this stuff up, guys. All this, it all meshes together, which is why the Ogygian deluge snuck up on these people, because they weren't looking for. They were looking at something else. I'm going to explain it to you in a minute. 2359 BC was 120 years before the flood. Noah is warned that the great flood is going to happen. Most scholars agree that if the story is true, the warning was probably astronomical. So 120 years, which is 60 plus 60 years before the great flood in 2239 BC in the month of May, something happened. So Noah receives a divine commission from God to warn the people of the coming flood, to repent so they can be saved. But listen, this is where it gets interesting. The great flood is now decreed, and the salvation being offered is spiritual. Pay attention, guys. God is determined to destroy the earth. Mankind is given 120 years. So, for a while, people were invited to build arks. People were invited, but they ridiculed Noah. They ridiculed him, all this. So, God basically, this is the story. God basically watched that the world just wasn't savable. It was time to employ the Sumerian Arab, the plow sign, the pentagram. Remember what a pentagram is. I've described it to you. In geometry, in order to form a pentagram, you must draw 10 angles of 108 degrees. Every angle must be 108 degrees to draw a perfect pentagram. 10 angles of 108 degrees on a two-dimensional plane is 1080. But when you render the two-dimensional plane into three-dimensional geometry, it forms a pyramid, because you got 4 at the bottom and 1 at the top. The Great Pyramid identifies the year of its construction. in the year 1080 Annus Mundi. Now, I've gone through this many times. There's many other associations to its own dating and all that, but this is what we're getting to here with the Great Flood. Remember, the Great Pyramid was specifically designed to survive the flood because it contains a message that's meant only for a last days generation. So Noah is literally telling people now at this point that salvation will only be spiritual from this point forward because the Sumerian Arab is coming. And in the Sumerian Arab, with the Sumerian Arab concept, we have the plow of God coming to break up the ground because the harvest has been removed. The harvest are all those souls that were deemed worthy to move on to another world, to another construct. They're no longer welcome here. This is a place of trial and testing. So the Arab comes and breaks up the ground, destroys all that, and out of those ruins is built a whole nother world. Enter Genesis 1, Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. The old Genesis 1 was built out of what? The Tiham, the waters of Tiamat, the waters of chaos and destruction. But Genesis 1 also says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In Hebrew, that is an all-inclusive, 100% perfect statement. It's grammatically perfect. It is grammatically final, meaning that sometime in the ancient past, God created the heavens and the earth. But by verse 2, the entire world is covered with water and the blackness of ruin after a major destruction. So we have this Adam and Eve reset that's going on. Again, the great flood of Noah was to be another one of these. Earth is baptized. In that baptizing, the old world dies and they start over. So this is the symbolism behind this story. Now, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero, when he visited Utnapishtim, the flood survivor, Noah of the city, the former king of Shuruppak, he had cut down 120 trees to build himself a boat to cross over the river of death. You got to understand, the Epic of Gilgamesh was about a guy who was distraught about dying, and he wanted the secret to immortal life. He wanted to know how in the hell the survivor of the flood, Utnapishtim, 3 centuries later, was still alive. So he said, man, he must have a secret about eternal life. So that's what the Epic of Gilgamesh is about. He's trying to figure this out, but he's doing everything from 100% a materialist standpoint. And the numbers in the Epic of Gilgamesh are all reflective of Genesis numbers, like the 120 trees he had to cross over to the river of death. The river of death is the flood. So we move on now to 2357 BC. 2357 BC, according to Chinese traditional history, in the Book of Myriad Things, the Emperor Yao ascended to the throne in this year, and some antiquarians claim that this begins the historical period for ancient Egypt. This date is only 2 years off from the 120-year warning given to Noah in 2359, and this is important because we've already seen one other date that was also 2 years off from a very significant event, and we're about to see another one. So that would be and further, the title Yao is akin to the ancient Semitic name for God, Yah. Noah in the Sumerian records was the king of the city of Shuruppak, and this strongly links this Yao to the Chinese Noah, since during the reign of Yao there also occurred a terrible flood. Remember, this is just 2 years off. The Chinese chronology is very, very close to the biblical. So what else happened? 2297 BC is a variant dating for the Chinese flood of Yao. It is 58 years off from 2239 BC. 58 years off from the 2239 BC collapse of the vapor canopy known as the flood of Noah. 58 years is 2 years off of a 60-year period. 2254 BC is the traditional date for the Chinese flood in which Fuhi, Noah, survived. Remember, guys, there is confusion even in the Chinese traditions, where Chinese scholars are trying to explain that we have two flood heroes. One was Fuhi from a flood before, and he often gets confused for Yao, and Yao was the second flood. Well, this is what happened here too. Whoever I'm citing right here also additionally also added Fuhi, but the traditional date for the flood of Yao was 2254 BC, but they called him Fuhi. This change between the prophet and the flood hero is very common. It even happens in the Bible. I mean, it even happens with biblical figures. So it's not uncommon to find it in traditional Chinese figures as well. So, let's see. So this demonstrates that the Chinese knew that Fuhi lived for hundreds of years, for they believed him to have been born in 2944 BC. And he is often mistaken for Yao. Goes both ways. The Chinese date for the flood is only 15 years off. And we find here evidence that the ancient Chinese were aware of the phoenix, which initiated the flood disaster. This is interesting. Why? Because they say that Fuhi was 690 years old when the flood occurred. If Fuhi was 690 years when the flood occurred, I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't. I don't believe men grew age that long. I mean, these are all calendar codes, because 690 years is precisely 5 times 138. So, yeah, I'm just not buying it, guys. I'm not buying it. This is a calendrical memory, is what this is. Remember, Fuhi was the origin of the calendar. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting though. But 690 years is divisible by 138. So for his age to be that right at the flood, and we know the Phoenix phenomenon is what caused the Great Flood in 2239 BC, to beyond coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. So then we get to 2239 BC, the year 1656, Annus Mundi. This is the Great Flood, the day the sky fell, the collapse of the vapor canopy. This is the flood of Noah, 2239 BC. It is the 1656 year of the antediluvian world, which across the board, I've cited so many different ancient authors, they all agree the pre-flood world was 1656 years long. Now, which is 33.3 jubilees, 50-year periods. So 2239 BC is 3,000th year since the Nemesis cataclysm. That's divisible by 600. It is 18 centuries from the capture of Luna, which is 600 plus 600 plus 600. It is 12 centuries from the appearance of Enki, Enoch, and the Anuna in 3439 BC, when another vapor canopy collapsed, caused a bunch of flooding, killed 1/3 of the human race, called the Gihon flood. That's 12 centuries, 600 plus 600 years earlier. The Great Flood is the 600th year since the first year of the oppression, the Nephilim dynasty in 2839 BC, the birth of Noah. So we have once we get to the flood, we have to realize all these ancient civilizations, they knew all this material. They know way more material than I've revealed to you in this video and in all my published books, in all my videos. They knew more than that. For me to be able to put all this out from the scraps of the past is phenomenal in itself. But what I'm trying to convey to you is that the amount of data the ancients had far surpasses what I've conveyed to you now. Therefore, what in the hell happened when you have an accurate record of everything that's happened up until that point? And you're an advanced civilization. You've tabulated all. You've got chronology. You've run simulations. You've done. Technology is nothing new. I tell you all the time. It only takes 200 years to go from horse and buggy to Hadron Collider. We have to accept the tenet that if anything is true today, then it must have been true at other times as well. Technology is nothing new. Therefore, what the hell happened that these civilizations uniformly got caught flat-footed. We're going to get into it. So we're going to look at, as we sum this little study up, we're going to look at this. We're going to look at this. These are all 60-year periods, guys. The Great Flood caused by Phoenix actually reinforced the faith in the use of the Anunnaki Nur chronology of 60-year periods. Let me repeat that. When the Great Flood occurred in the month of May 2239 BC, it was caused by the Phoenix, but the Phoenix wasn't they didn't attribute the Phoenix to the flood. They knew it was Typhon. They mentioned that in ancient records, but they never really attributed the Phoenix to a chronology, because until that date, they hadn't seen any evidence of a periodicity of Phoenix appearances. But what they did know is that 5239 BC, year one of the Anunnaki calendar, was 50 periods of 60 years each before the Great Pyramid. That means 50 times they could count 60 years, 60 years, 60 years, 60 years, all the way back to the Nemesis Cataclysm. And they could do the same thing for the rebellion of the Anuna from the matriarch, the goddess, in 4639 BC. The original Anunnaki rebellion was 40 periods of 60 years. That's 40 times you can count 60 years all the way back to 4639 BC. The Great Flood was also 30 periods of 60 years from the capture of Luna, the appearance of the moon, and the appearance of the Ogygi, the aggressors. So we have the Nemesis X object appeared in 3499 BC, which was 21 periods of 60 years each before the flood. And then the Anuna appeared with Enki. A whole other group of Anuna appear with Enki. They come out of the mountain and they help people. They're not trying to enslave anybody. They help people. They give them infrastructure. They feed them after the collapse of a vapor canopy. 3439 BC is 20 periods of 60 years each. These were in the histories of all these civilizations when the Great Flood occurred. This was their syllabus. They knew all this. They also knew that 3319 BC, which they wouldn't have called it that at that time. It was a different calendar back then. I'm just giving you the dates on our calendar. But 120 years of labor was two 60-year periods. They counted, all their calendars were based on denominators of 60 years. So 2839 BC, Noah is born in the first year of the oppression of the Nephilim during the 7 kings. Same thing that's going to unfold in the book of Revelation. During the age of the 7 kings will be the first year of the oppression. Humanity will be enslaved. We're talking about an event that's going to occur after the year 2052. But here it is in the ancient past. The first year of the oppression of the Nephilim was 10 periods of 60 years before the flood. 2779 BC was the beginning of the Egyptian short chronology. It was 9 periods of 60 years before the Great Flood. 2359 BC was the 120-year warning that Noah got from the Godhead, the Oversoul, the astronomical deal, whatever it was. It's 2 periods of 60 years. So having this massive amount of data from the ancient world, the data that they had was they better be careful and they better watch, because the 60-year period, these epicycles, all kinds of major events were occurring, but they really need to watch out, because every 600 years, something terrible happens. The Great Flood in 2239 BC was the 600th year from the birth of Noah, which was 600 years after the appearance of Enki and the Gihon flood. You got to understand, 600 years before the flood was Nephilim oppression. 600 years before that was Gihon flood, starvation, mass dying, flooding. 600 years before that was mass flooding and the capture of Luna when the moon appeared. The Ogygi appeared as oppressors. 600 years before that, the Anuna themselves rebelled and were struck down in war by a matriarch. 600 years before that, the matriarch's civilization literally imploded in the Nemesis Cataclysm. So they knew Every 600 years, something terrible was going to happen. This was the calendar. They had not yet, by the Great Flood, understood that the phoenix itself was also a part of a chronology. They hadn't discovered this yet. They were still counting, even after the flood. They were waiting for the 600th year to come. Let's look at some events after the flood. The Sumerian king list record records that the Kish dynasty after the flood consisted of 23 kings who ruled for 24,510 years. Well, if the Great Flood was in 2239 BC, then that means the Kish dynasty doesn't even end until 20,000 AD. Well, we know that's not the right interpretation because Zechariah Sitchin got it all wrong. Billy Carson gets it all wrong. We have to interpret it by the way the Sumerian decimal system was designed. That 24,510 years is actually shars. It never says years. It says shars. Shars are units of time. They are turnings of the stars. Therefore, 24,510 turnings of the stars after the flood indicates that 23 kings ruled for 408 years. And that's really acceptable, because it fits perfectly with what archaeology says about all the dynasties of Kish after the flood. It fits absolutely precise. So this data set demonstrates why the ancients maintained faith in this calendar. So I'm going to show you a few events after the flood that would have reinforced this belief. In the year 2179 BC, we find something interesting. You know what American scholars say? They say that 2179 BC was year one of the ancient Toltec calendar. What the hell? Why would they choose that? I'm going to tell you why. Because 2179 BC was exactly 60 years after the Great Flood. This was the beginning of the water sun age to the Toltecs. Can't make this stuff up, guys. You just can't make it up. The reason we get 2179 BC is because Aztec Spanish historian Ixtlatl, I can't pronounce that dude's name. Some of y'all can. Ixtlil Shittle. Ishel Shittle, I don't know, whatever. Bunch of X's in that name. Said the water sun began in the 1716th year of the old world's calendar. Well, 1716 Annus Mundi is 2179 BC, and 2179 BC just happens to be 60 years after the Great Flood. So we have a reference to another calendar that happened to begun to start on the 60-year periods. Not a coincidence. So interestingly, the Aztecs settled in a place called Huanaco, Hu-Anak, a place named in commemoration of the Anunnaki. 2119 BC is the 120th year after the flood, when Canaan excavates a monument from before the flood and finds a writing, an inscription from the Watchers. This is 60 years plus 60 years after the Great Flood. He has to hide this relic, this giant, it was a huge relic covered in writings from before the flood. It was a writing of the Watchers. He had to go hide it because he knew Noah would have it destroyed. And I will say this, some Hebrew sources call it a writing of the Watchers, but I know that there's the Midrashic text, the Hadaroth calls it the writings of the giants. Same difference. During the vapor canopy, everybody was giant. So, concerned astronomy and celestial bodies, hidden knowledges, all this stuff. And Noah was preaching against all this knowledge and the science of the Watchers. So Canaan took it and hid it and then studied it. This is in the year 2119 BC. 1879 BC is exactly 360 years after the Great Flood. It is 60 times 6. It's perfect in Sumerian mathematics. This is the epic battle of Elam against Babylonia. This is Keto-Larimor. This is Genesis chapter 14 and 15. It's connected to the event of Genesis chapter 14 and 15. And basically, Amar Udaak, who was Merodach in the Acadians, or Marduk of Babylon. The Jews called him Nimrod. He literally took on Chedorlaomer, who is called Kudur-Lagamar in the Kudur-Lagamar cuneiform texts. And this story is all verified in the cuneiform. Genesis chapter 14 was a real war involving giants, and it's verified in the Kudur-Lagamar texts, which are found in cuneiform. And it's also verified in Babylonian archaeology, where it's found that Nimrod got the shit beat out of him. He lost his whole entire army. He got put in his place and made a vassal. So this is also the origin of 3 Indian epics. They're all related to this time period, this 13-year, 14-year war that is found called the Battle of Kurukshetra. It is in the Mahabharata. It is also related to the not the Bhagavad Gita, but the Ramayana epic. Concerns the same individual. But yeah, this is 1879 BC. And this too is on the 60-year patterning coming back. So we have this major battle involving the giants. This is the battle. This is what the Greeks called the Gigantomachia or the Titanomachia. It's featured on the Parthenon. This is the epic battle between the Titans and the giants. It is 1879 BC, and it would have been understood by all these civilizations that were recording these events at that time, that damn, that's on the 60-year patterning. So it reinforced that calendar. All these civilizations employing technolithic precision, laser type boring. We're talking about the Heliolithic Maritime Empire was constructing hundreds of sites all around the world out of megalithic blocks, like at Baalbek, the trilithons at Baalbek. We have seen the archaeology. We have seen these massive constructions all around the world, and how the tools were all laid out as people were running around, because the Ogygian deluge caught them all flat-footed. They were anticipating having 48 more years till the 600th year after the Great Flood. The belief in a calendar had completely fooled every civilization in the ancient world. They believed they had 48 more years, and they were preparing for the 600th year. This is why all the earthquake-proof fortifications were all being built throughout Cuzco and Peru and Ollantaytambo, or whatever it's called, Tiahuanaco and Pumapunka, Easter Island, Aku Aku, Metallinan. They were everywhere. I can't even name all the different sites. I named over 60 or 70 of them in my chronicle, and I still didn't name them all. I don't think David Hatcher Childers named them all, but these sites were being built all over the world. They were earthquake-proofing everything. Lion's Gate, of Atreus, of Mycenae, Knossos. All these places were being built and earthquake-proofed. This is the purpose of Cyclopean masonry. This is the purpose of the way they built their structures was not out of uniform brick, because uniform brick does not absorb shock. Cyclopean boulders do absorb shock. So they were trying to earthquake proof everything, build everything on high ground. They thought they had 48 more years to prepare for this epic cataclysm, because their history had showed that every 600 years these things happen. And then the epicycles of 60-year periods confirm the 600-year periods. So they knew something bad was going to happen, and they prepared for it. And in the 552nd year after the flood, a phoenix cycle, 138 times 4. While they were working in their shops, they were absolutely unprepared for the appearance of Typhon in the sky. Typhon took out the entire world. It is by far the most well-described, epic, worldwide destruction that we have in any historical texts. I haven't even got to those texts yet. That's going to be the subject matter of part 5 of the Ogygian deluge. All I've described is all the ancillary data. Part 5, we're going to go into the ancient authors who actually talked about the Ogygian deluge and what they described, what appeared in the sky, and how it destroyed everything and created a 25-year darkness. The adherence to a calendar completely fooled the entire world. Now, all of this history based on 60-year intervals had the civilization of the Heliolithic Maritime Empire believing that they had till the year 2208, Annus Mundi. which is our 1687. No, I'm sorry. They believe that they had all the way till 1639 BC of our calendar, but they didn't. They were interrupted 48 years early. In 48 years, they would have been done. The entire world, all these Heliolithic maritime empire, all these trade empire, they would have been done. They would have had all these fortifications. That would have been absolutely finished. And the survival rate would have been phenomenal. It would have been excellent. They'd have fully prepared for what they knew that was already coming. But they got fooled. The phoenix appeared and caused the great flood, but it did so at the exact same time that the Anunnaki Ner chronology unfolded. To me, this is deceit. This is epic deception. Something wanted to deceive the entire world. Didn't want it to know about the phoenix until after the great flood. But not only then, it wanted to use the phoenix to destroy the whole world. It took this destruction to wake them up, because now the historical record is introduced, the phoenix cycle, 552-year phoenix cycle. We have hints of its existence before the flood, but no records, no traditions ever mention it as known before the flood. All we knew was that the pre-flood world was 1656 years. Well, 1656 years is 552 times 3. So we can extrapolate that the phoenix was operative. The phoenix caused the Adam and Eve reset in 3895 BC, but the ancients didn't know that. They were on a totally different calendar, and events were occurring on that calendar that reinforced the belief of the importance of that calendar. So when the world was destroyed in the great flood of Noah, they knew damn well they better wait. They need to pay attention, because 600 years in the future, it would happen again. They thought they had all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. But whatever runs this construct fooled them and used the phoenix to do it. So let's see, I'm not done with that. Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing. So you have to understand, they were caught flat-footed because of a belief in a paradigm. That paradigm involved a calendar that had remained fixed for over 3,000 years. It had remained fixed, because even the 3,000th year, which was on the 600 years and the 60 years, even after that 3,000th year, they kept seeing things happen every 60 years that reinforced the belief in that calendar. So they thought they had 600 years after that. Why wouldn't they? They haven't been introduced to any other cyclical destructions that by which were measurable, that they could extrapolate a future date to be worried about. They couldn't. The history of the antediluvian world had completely deceived the people who had survived the Great Flood and built a new world. They were totally fooled. And then the phoenix called the Typhon, then it began to terrorize this new world. Because as soon as the 1687 BC event was done, 25-year darkness, Hesiod describes a new age of heroes and giants. And the reason he was able to say that is because it's true. Even a temporary vapor canopy can spawn an entire generation of giants. We've already seen evidence of this in 1902, when just a couple senior citizens for a couple months on an island exposed to ambient radiation of a volcano grew 2 inches. One was 58 years old and one was 62 or 63. So imagine 25 years of being exposed to ambient radiation, increased air pressure, and more mineral and vitamin content. All this, it happens fast. It happens rapidly. Just as fast as vapor canopies appear, they also disappear. So this is my presentation, guys. This is what the Ogygian deluge did. It ended the entire world. Everything that we know from encyclopedias and the historical record that's been taught in colleges, universities, all that stuff about the ancient world, ancient Egypt, ancient Babylon, ancient India, it's almost all post 1687 BC. after the Ogygian deluge, because the real civilizations that existed before this were advanced. Yeah, we haven't been told the truth about these histories. They were chronologists, they were mathematicians, they were sky gazers, they were builders. They could build better than we do today. We build out of temporary materials. Their buildings are still standing, even though it's been 5 or 6 cataclysms ago. They're still standing in different areas of the world. Earthquake-proof walls and citadels. It's massive. It's crazy. But imagine if they would have been able to finish their projects. They weren't. But the world changed. The world has fundamentally changed. Now we build temporary constructions that don't even last 200 years. But this was my presentation, just to open up your eyes to just how severe the Ogygian deluge was before we go into the next presentation, where I actually cite the ancient authors and texts that all talk about this destruction. This is 4 videos covering what happened everywhere in the world except the Mediterranean, where all these texts come from. The Ogygian deluge is the epic cataclysm that history forgot. No one's talking about it. No one refers to it. But it is what singly destroyed the ancient world that we know almost nothing about. And all those civilizations, which seem fantastic with their flying machines and their monorails and rails that go over Malta and Texas. Yeah, we found the petrified rails, guys. Yeah, we have found so many technologically advanced parts. It's mind-boggling. These things existed because the technology that we enjoy today is nothing new. It's nothing new. It was just in a very different form back then. So that's my presentation. It went way longer than I anticipated, 3 hours long. I've been running my mouth. I'm going to need something to eat. But I'm going to go within 5 minutes. You will be able to get the download of this entire presentation on a free PDF from Podia. Those of you who have been to my Podia and you can get there, you can get it now. It's been on Podia the entire time I've been doing this presentation. I'm going to go to Podia real quick and I'm going to get it for you. I'm going to post it in the description box. But yeah, sorry, these Ogygian deals, I don't have time for Q&As on these Ogygian presentations, guys. But I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and it just makes sense of everything that we have found in the old world. They were not prepared because they had been trained to believe that the architecture of basically their world was fixed on a certain timeline. And they got caught with the bait and switch, because the next timeline after that also remained true for a long period of time. Every 552 years, it was terrible, until the year 522 AD, when the Roman Catholic Church finally did away with the 552 year period to hide it from the public. I got a video about it, guys. It's real compelling. You can't argue against what I show, because I'm not just telling you, I'm showing you the books where it's admitted that they did this. The calendar that you and I are under today, Anno Domini calendar. Yeah, guys, it was created by the Roman Catholic Church to hide the Phoenix phenomenon. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, and I think I might eat me some ice cream. I'm fiending for some ice cream. How'd that happen?